He's the top student in school, the brilliant one, while the popular kids are busy chasing after every girl in sight. Jay keeps his nose in his books, but even for a guy who only focuses on studying, there are girls who can't help but notice him. This one girl can't take her eyes off the student council president. But one day, the guy who never does anything but study and never gets into a fight shows up at school looking beat up. Everyone was stunned. Nobody could figure out what on earth happened to him. Jay is the kind of student destined to rank first in the nation. He follows every rule to the letter. But then everything shifted when the teacher introduced a new transfer student who just arrived from the United States. Since she's the principal's granddaughter, everyone is expected to be on their best behavior around her. The moment that blonde girl spotted Jay in class, she couldn't help herself and hugged him right in front of everyone. The whole room went into shock, especially the girl who had been secretly crushing on Jay all this time. Get a load of this. Even the principal was watching his granddaughter's first day of school from the window upstairs. The protagonist had absolutely no clue what was going on. He'd never even seen this girl before in his life. But the girl, Shelley, just glanced at the guy beside him and dropped the bomb. "You plain-looking kid, I want your seat." Naturally, the guy didn't dare refuse such a polite request. Before long, students who weren't even friends with Jay were crowding around him, grilling him about since when he started dating a perfect 10. The only one feeling down in the dumps was that girl. But to get why, we've got to rewind a few days. Back. This guy is Jay, and even though he lives right near the school, he's obsessed with cycling. The reason's simple. School is a total snooze fest, so he needs that morning adrenaline rush. Every obstacle is just part of the challenge. So Jay tears through the streets like he's auditioning for a Red Bull sponsorship. Construction workers jump back in fear, and couples kissing on the sidewalk scatter when he comes barreling down toward the death trap slope, where even braking is a gamble. Jay isn't fazed. He rockets down at full throttle and pulls off some insane, high-level maneuvers to skid to a halt. The popular kids at school were witnessing this for the first time, and let's just say they weren't thrilled to see someone radiating more main character energy than they were. Some were impressed, but others, they were itching to take him down a peg. Once classes let out, a new kind of chaos began, with everyone surrounding Jay whining about something or other. Jay, however, stayed locked in on his own world, completely ignoring the noise around him. As Jay sat there feeling utterly burnt out, Mia was watching him from nearby. She was caught off guard when her friend poked her, asking what was on her mind. With a smirk, her friend wanted to know if Mia had been hitting the books hard for the upcoming exams. Mia muttered that she was just studying on and off. Her friend nudged her to put in some real effort, unless she wanted to tank her grades. Her friend felt Mia should focus, but not to the point of obsession. Mia figured the student council president was just some robot who lived for textbooks and had zero hobbies. Still, whenever anyone started talking trash about him, Mia was always the first to jump to his defense. Mia couldn't stop singing the president's praises, yet it was obvious to everyone that she thought Jay was something else. That's when her friend realized Mia was totally crushing on Jay. The guy with the black jacket and red hair had every girl in school swooning. Minu was also a massive heartthrob among the girls in class. When Yuna caught sight of Minu, she noticed the whole room buzzing the moment he walked in. As soon as Yuna made a little comment, Minu fired back, calling her a grandma. Yuna definitely didn't appreciate the jab, even less so when Minu stuck his tongue out and threw in another useless remark. It left Yuna pretty heated. Even though her friend told her to keep her cool, Yuna unleashed every insult in the book. Even with her being so hot-headed, an onlooker couldn't help but notice how beautiful Yuna looked, even when she was throwing a fit. Tom Kong was obsessed with even the smallest moves Yuna made. Minu, however, thought his sister was just being a drama queen and preferred to just slip away quietly, acting like he didn't even know her. Despite all the chaos, Jay stayed locked in on his studies. As Minu tried to make a break for it to escape his sister, he decided to say hi to Jay. Jay just completely blanked him, but Minu quickly realized he was being ignored, and he wasn't about to give up that easily. Jay told him he was busy and asked him to get to the point. Minu didn't miss his chance to invite Jay to join the crew. He managed to snag Jay's attention for a second, pointing out that the downhill maneuver Jay pulled off was absolutely insane. Minu mentioned how shocked the whole team was to see Jay clear the slope in a single drift. He was even more floored to find out that Jay was the student council president. Minu explained he came specifically to ask if Jay wanted to join their group. Once again, Minu was blown off and got zero response from Jay. Minu kept trying to grab his attention, but it was a total bust. It looked weird to everyone else, especially since nobody knew they were even friends. Mia, for her part, was dying to know what they were whispering about. Jay clearly wasn't interested and just wanted Minu to stop messing with his study time. Minu couldn't believe Jay really didn't care at all. As he turned to walk away, Minu muttered that it was fine and apologized for the interruption, grumbling that guys like Jay were just plain annoying. Even though Jay didn't seem to listen to a word Minu said, it actually sparked a little bit of interest. Hearing about cycling reminded him of when he was 13 and got his first bike. His uncle had given him the bike, mentioning that while hitting the books was important, it was good to get some fresh air every now and then. He also said that if Jay got better, they could go on bike trips together. Once class was out, everyone flooded out of the school to hang out with their friends. Yuna and Mia were venting about how stressful it is being a teenager. Yuna had always pictured her teenage years being more romantic and epic, but it was just the same old thing every day. Mia told Yuna not to be such a downer, reminding her that tons of adventures were still waiting for her. Yuna wished that fun would hurry up and start, because she was totally over school. Mia suggested she look on the bright side, promising her things would get better during the break. Suddenly, Dom Kang popped up, asking if Yuna wanted to catch a zombie flick with him. Startled, Yuna yelled at him to keep it down, deciding he needed a little punishment. She'd already warned him not to sneak up on her like that, because that's exactly what a creep would do. After the scuffle, Dom Kang realized Yuna could throw a mean punch. As soon as he recovered, he chased after her, pumped to watch the movie on a 90-inch LED screen. Meanwhile, Jay watched his classmates leave from the window while packing up his school supplies. After slinging his backpack over his shoulder to head out, he noticed Minu was back behind him again. Minu explained that he wanted to come back while Jay wasn't busy studying. He quickly added that he just wanted one more chance for Jay to reconsider joining the team. Minu mentioned there was a race that night and a competitor wanted to challenge Jay. Jay, however, just stared Minu dead in the eyes and said he hadn't even started riding yet. He told Minu to quit bothering him and go find some friends to play with. Regardless, Minu pushed on, bringing up a guy from their group named TJ Quinn. Minu explained that TJ Quinn had been talking trash about Jay's bike, claiming that it was just a piece of junk, nothing special at all. TJ Quinn also barked that he hated seeing someone put so much value on a bike's specs. Minu chimed in that TJ had been watching Jay ride that bike for ages and was itching to challenge him to a race. The meetup spot would be Green Park that very night. Even though Jay didn't say a word, his discomfort with the comments about his bike was plain to see. The park was buzzing that night, packed with people looking to blow off some steam. There were tons of riders showing off tricks and just hanging out. A few of them proved that a bike could be used for so much more than just racing. The Zephyrus team's stunts really stole the show, and a crowd quickly gathered to watch them. Minu was calm and focused when his buddy June decided to mess with him. June pressed a cold soda can against Minu's face, catching him off guard. Smirking, June told Minu to chill out and offered him a drink. After taking it, Minu was certain that Jay would actually show up. Minu replied that there wasn't much to do other than wait. June suggested that if Jay didn't show, he could just practice some racing lines. Then June asked why Minu was so obsessed with Jay. Minu gave his answer. He insisted he wasn't obsessed and told June to keep his voice down, just so nobody would get the wrong idea. June chimed in, saying there was no need for a reason to go biking, especially considering just how skilled Jay was. It was obvious he'd been riding for years. June figured it would be way more fun if Jay just joined them for a spin. Instead of just riding solo, Minu and June were busy trash-talking when another group rolled up. The crew started pestering Minu about where that guy from his school was, since Jay was already running super late. Minu just told them to hold their horses for a bit longer. One of the guys started running his mouth, hinting that Jay was dodging the challenge. But Minu, totally confident in Jay, fired back, telling them there was no point in being so cocky, since Jay would show up any second. Minu suggested that in the meantime, he could just do a warm-up lap. The group totally underestimated Minu, ignoring the fact that his leg was still healing from the heat of the moment. Finally, Jay showed up, and the whole crowd started whispering about his legendary reputation. Seeing Jay arrive, Minu sighed, thinking it was a bummer, because he'd been really looking forward to racing TJ on his carbon fiber bike. But hey, maybe there'd be another chance next time. TJ walked right up and asked if Jay was really the guy he'd challenged. As he got closer, TJ reached out to shake hands, smugly saying he'd honestly thought Jay would be a no-show. Jay, true to form, just totally ignored the gesture. TJ started wondering if Jay had some kind of attitude problem. As Jay stepped up, Minu mentioned how he'd been sweating bullets, thinking Jay wasn't going to make it. Jay just cut to the chase and told them to get on with the main event. Since he was in a rush, he told them June would handle the logistics. June, waving from a distance. To avoid being snubbed, introduced himself as being from Sunny High School. He said his name was June Lee, and that he was a junior, which actually surprised Minu. He didn't know June could be so formal. Another kid, Jack Joe, chimed in that he was a sophomore. Then he broke down the ground rules for the race. It was simple and individual sprint. The first one to make it back to the start line wins, adding that Jay probably knew the route by heart anyway. Still, he promised to station people at every turn to keep things safe and keep everyone on the right track. Minu pointed out that his opponent was the cocky guy. Jay replied coldly, telling Minu to quit bothering him about joining the team after the race was over. June tossed a helmet to Jay, stressing the importance of staying safe. While checking out the bike, Minu noticed that Jay had stripped off the brakes, probably just to shave off some extra weight. Once everyone was set, TJ tried to get under Jay's skin, daring him to try and keep up with his pace. Minu told TJ to zip it with the bragging and just focus on the race. Pissed off, TJ snapped back, asking why Minu always loved to show off. Someone announced to the group that the race was going to be filmed. The setup was pretty basic. Once the signal dropped, the pedals would start turning. Holding the gear with his fingers, the announcer told everyone to lock in. Then he let go, and it slowly hit the ground. The second it touched the pavement, everyone scrambled to kick off the race. Jay immediately took the lead, his lightweight bike giving him an insane edge. June knew the real battle would start once Jay decided to really hammer the pedals and pick up the speed. June had to hustle to keep up and catch all the action on camera. TJ kept running his mouth, mocking Jay and calling his bike a total piece of junk. Glancing back, TJ told Jay to get used to the view, or just try to pass him. It looked like TJ's taunts only motivated Jay to push his bike even harder. When TJ looked back again, he realized Jay was closing in fast, and this wasn't going to be the walk in the park he expected. Jay was reeling him in, forcing TJ to crank his speed up to the max. Just then they hit a sharp turn. TJ swiped at some traffic cones to make the path tougher for his rival. For Jay, though, those cones were nothing. He was used to dodging obstacles every single day. June caught TJ's dirty move and couldn't believe what a snake he was being. Sure enough, the cone knocked Jay off his rhythm. While filming and watching it all go down, June screamed at Jay to look out because a car was barreling right into their path, and a collision looked unavoidable. Jay thought fast. He used the car like a ramp, launching himself forward with extra momentum. He pulled off an insane maneuver. That process totally infuriated him, as it wasn't part of his plan. June, who was filming the whole scene, was stunned and knew the footage would turn out incredible. After recovering from that little scare, I kept pedaling and picked up speed. After the adrenaline rush, June felt relieved that he didn't just witness a disaster. He also shouted at TJ to cut out his reckless behavior. At one point, TJ offered a sarcastic apology, claiming his foot just slipped. However, Jay was way bolder than TJ had expected. While filming, June kept his eyes glued to TJ's every move, wary of what he might try to pull. On the flip side, June was in awe of Jay's skills, thinking that 360-degree spin and his reaction time were absolutely phenomenal. June wished his classmates could see this live. The race pressed on with Jay closing in on TJ fast. In a heartbeat, they were riding neck and neck. Jay just wanted to end this ridiculous race. I figured I was just talking to throw him off his game. Approaching a sharp curve, a new challenge. TJ was already hatching a plan. He thought he could pull something off. in this tight turn because he'd spotted a critical opening. Instead of slowing down, TJ looked like he was pushing even harder. Jay, though, had a totally different approach to cycling. He took the turn with mind-blowing control. Now TJ had a front row seat to Jay's showmanship and maneuvers. He even got the chance to watch a perfectly executed drift right in front of him. As soon as they cleared the curve, Jay had a massive lead. TJ's face showed his growing frustration, unlike Jay, who was just flowing with the race, enjoying every bit of the moment. June was even more hyped about Jay, never imagining he would drift to take a corner. June had no clue where Jay learned to ride like that, but Jay was handling that old bike like it was an extension of his own body. For TJ, who was falling behind and fuming that he couldn't close the gap, it seemed impossible for his carbon bike to lose to that piece of junk. As TJ seethed with anger, he looked ahead and saw Jay wave a hand back at him. Looking back at TJ, Jay declared that from now on, that was the view TJ would be stuck with. This made TJ lose his mind, and he started pedaling in a frenzy. Furious, TJ barked that Jay could just wait because this wasn't over yet. TJ told him he'd catch up, and it was only a matter of time. Looking back at TJ, Jay replied that studying wouldn't be necessary. His goal was to finish the whole thing in 4 minutes. Jay knew that TJ didn't want him to think that just because he was in the lead. The race was already in the bag. Jay looked down on everyone at school, seeing them as nothing more than a bunch of losers. The gap between them started to widen in a flash. June just prayed that nothing bad would happen, hoping they'd all finish in one piece. Jay was pedaling effortlessly, while TJ was pushing himself to his absolute breaking point just to keep up. Seething with annoyance, TJ swore he wouldn't let Jay leave him in the dust that easily. He barked that he'd catch him on the final hill. But for Jay, it was child's play. He'd already pulled off a handful of insane maneuvers. June, trailing behind to capture the footage, screamed at them to slow down because the descent was way too steep. Plus, there was a fence waiting right at the bottom. June was terrified that someone was going to get wrecked if they didn't handle the turn perfectly. Still, neither of them had any intention of hitting the brakes, no matter how much June kept yelling at them. Jay, showing off his elite skills, zipped down without even grazing the fence. He killed his speed by scraping against it, just enough to slingshot himself forward, then kept pedaling like it was nothing. But the guy behind him wasn't so lucky. TJ had built up way too much momentum on that slope with a fence, waiting at the bottom. He was in deep trouble. No matter how hard he slammed the brakes, there was no way to stop in time to avoid a collision. It was inevitable. He was going to hit it. He slammed straight into the fence and his bike went flying. June, who was riding carefully behind, caught the moment TJ wiped out. Jay glanced back, saw the mess, and immediately doubled back to help. After seeing TJ couldn't move, Jay slowed his bike down with that classic cold stare of his. Jay called TJ a loser right to his face, and then just calmly pedaled off. Meanwhile, TJ was peeling himself off the ground, and June scrambled over to check on him, still sprawled on the dirt. TJ was hurting from the injuries, but his pride was taking an even bigger hit. Back at the finish line, people were busy, killing time. Minu was messing around with a bike game when he heard someone say the riders were coming back. He thought the race was surprisingly fast and got hyped, especially since he just smashed his own high score in the game. The crowd started whispering that the guy in the sunny outfit arrived first, which meant TJ had choked. TJ's buddies were floored. They couldn't believe he'd lost, and they started freaking out because the riders still hadn't shown up. Minu figured all the hype surrounding TJ was just hot air. He finally got what was coming to him, though. Minu always did say it wasn't the bike that mattered, but the rider behind the handlebars. He knew he'd have to check the footage once June got back. Jay looked at Minu and told him to remember what he said earlier. Before the race, Jay pulled off his helmet, tossed it to Minu, and pulled up his hoodie. Jay told Minu to stop bugging him at school with all his talk about racing and stop following him around on the way home. Everyone thought he was ice cold. Minu was dying for his friend to arrive so he could get the full scoop on what went down. The moment Minu saw them, he was shocked and blurted out what happened. Minu spotted Jay carrying TJ and immediately started screaming for a first aid kit. The onlookers were asking what the hell happened and suggested rushing TJ to the hospital. TJ gritting his teeth in agony. Couldn't handle the sheer humiliation of the situation. Even while busted up, TJ was still acting arrogant, demanding that the guy responsible for his crash be brought to him. Back home after the race, Jay noticed the place was empty since his mom was on shift. His brother Keijo asked Jay where he'd been goofing off, suspecting he was out riding his bike again. Jay didn't say a word and just leaned down to kick off his shoes while his brother wouldn't stop lecturing him about college and entrance exams, insisting he shouldn't be wasting time on a bike with his friends. Everything changed for Jay the second he heard the TV switch to the kids' block. Jay jumped with excitement as his long-awaited cartoon finally started, completely missing the fact that he slammed his hip into the corner of the table. He was rolling around on the floor in pain, but it slowly faded away once the anime really got going. His grumpy expression melted into pure fascination. Despite acting like such a grown-up, Jay was a total softie whenever a cat-themed show came on TV. Keijo took advantage of Jay being distracted to jump in the shower and wash off the sweat from his own run. Under the shower, Keijo found himself lost in thought, the intense highlights of the race replaying over and over in his mind. A strange, unsettling feeling washed over him. He had never reacted like this before. The next morning, Jay was already prepped for school. While checking his bike's tires, Jay noticed they were completely trashed from yesterday's race. That wasn't good. As he stood there dwelling on it, his brother stepped out and started watching him like a hawk. Keijo demanded to know what was wrong with the bike and grilled him on whether he was actually planning to ride that thing to school. Watching his brother gear up, Keijo couldn't help but think Jay was becoming obsessed with cycling. Jay, however, didn't spare a single thought for his brother's warnings that biking in the morning was just a waste of energy. A student shouldn't be burning themselves out so early, he argued. But Jay, already set on riding, simply said goodbye. Keijo couldn't wrap his head around what was wrong with his brother, or where he was headed if he kept acting like this. Keijo was standing there dead serious when a spotted cat suddenly darted out, freezing right in front of him in terror. Keijo had chased this same cat plenty of times before, and in that moment he felt that familiar itch to give chase once more. Meanwhile, Mia was rushing to catch her bus. It was packed to the brim that day, and she felt like a sardine in a can. As the bus crawled through the soul-crushing morning gridlock, Jay was effortlessly gliding past in the fresh air. He leaned into the cool breeze hitting his face. Inside the bus, everyone was griping about the chaotic bumper-to-bumper traffic. Mia scanned the area, feeling totally checked out from the idle chatter of the boys nearby. Suddenly, her eyes locked onto something that made her flush instantly. It was her crush, effortlessly coasting by on his bike. Seeing him head to school on two wheels made her completely forget how miserable the cramped bus ride was. Soon enough, those same boys realized that a bike could easily beat the bus. They started thinking they might need a faster, more comfortable set of wheels themselves. Meanwhile, inside a luxury car, stuck in that same nightmare traffic, a young man let out an annoyed growl. His chauffeur was doing his best, but they were barely inching toward the school gates. But when the guy spotted a cyclist likely to reach campus way before he would, he barked at the driver, saying he'd rather hop on a bike than sit rotting in this car. As Jay kept pedaling along, the school principal, who was a total bike enthusiast himself, pulled up alongside him. Jay shot a glance to the side and saw the principal, who remarked that cycling was a fantastic way to get some cardio in. Jay wasn't even surprised to see the principal heading to school on a bike himself. The principal, a sturdy, well-built guy, made it his mission to commute that way every single day. He pointed out that you really have to be on high alert while riding, because racers like them aren't exactly welcomed with open arms. The streets and sidewalks were just too dangerous for cyclists. And unfortunately, even the bike lanes didn't offer total protection. Grinning, the principal told Jay to put the shop talk on hold and really pick up the pace. Jay laughed, quipping that he and the student council president definitely couldn't afford to be late. At the school gate, a scene was unfolding as some students were being pulled over. A sophomore was being singled out for a dress code violation, or maybe his flashy attitude. He tried to slip past unnoticed, but got busted because his hair was a wild, unnatural color. When they confronted him, they mockingly asked if he'd accidentally spilled orange juice all over his head. On top of that, he wasn't wearing his ID badge or carrying his bag. He claimed he'd already left them inside. Yeah, that definitely wasn't the answer they were looking for. When Jay and the principal rolled up, they saw the whole chaotic mess playing out this early in the morning. The principal wanted to know what was going on, and the staff member explained he was just enforcing the school's code of conduct. The principal sighed, saying that was a pretty lousy way to start the morning. It looked like the students gathered there were all the campus lookers. The principal wanted to make sure the school's reputation stayed intact, and urged the students to pay more attention to their uniforms. They all put on their best innocent faces, promising the principal they'd sharpen up their look. A second later, they bolted like a bunch of troublemakers. Still, that handsome orange-haired student paused, his ears perking up as some gorgeous girls walked onto the scene. He thought to himself, since when did this place have such stunning girls hiding around the corner? Since he looked so small and cute, he caught their eye, and they invited him over. Around lunchtime, the principal couldn't help but notice the kids still had that youthful charm. The janitor reminded the principal that he had a lecture scheduled for that morning. The classroom was rowdy, people chatting away while others were just trying to catch some shut-eye. Yuna was showing Mia something on her phone, a photo of the principal, along with some explanatory text. She claimed it was all essential material for the lecture. He definitely had style. Yuna caught Mia staring at someone and grilled her on why she was doing that. Mia just mentioned that Jay had biked to school today. Yuna immediately teased her, saying someone was clearly crushing hard. When Yuna looked over at her own admirer, the guy with the band-aid-shaped mustache, she chucked a book right at his forehead and told him to stop lurking behind her. He figured that was just her way of showing she cared. While all that chaos was going on, Jay was just sitting in the corner, nose buried in a book. Some guys in the back were buzzing about a video they'd seen online of a bike race. Even the ones who weren't into cycling were hooked on that clip. Minu strolled by and mentioned he'd seen the footage that June recorded of the race. The girls hanging out with Minu were dying to know how he knew the student council president. Mia was one brave girl, always keeping tabs on what was happening in class. Meanwhile, a boy who had a thing for Mia was fast asleep. Everyone was pretty bored, except for the guys sleeping and dreaming about getting scolded by Yuna. Every now and then he'd sneak a glance at his crush to see if she'd noticed him, even though he wouldn't look back. Just the thought that he might be looking back made her blush. At one point, he did look, but with a totally blank stare. Maybe he didn't even see her. Maybe he was just zoning out at the clouds. Everyone started heading out. Someone spotted Jay in the distance, getting ready to ride again. Unable to help himself, Dom Kang wanted to take it for a spin for just a second. So he put a hand on Jay's shoulder and asked. Dom Kang got completely ignored and had no choice but to watch Jay ride off into the distance. Jade walked up and told Dom Kang he wasn't about to lend him the bike, warning him that he'd probably just wreck it. Dom Kang felt his mood lift the second he heard Yuna's voice. Beaming with happiness, Dom Kang asked Yuna if she'd noticed how glowing and radiant his skin looked today. Yuna shot back that his face was just greasy because he'd slept through the whole lecture. Dom Kang didn't give up, repeatedly telling Yuna to stop pretending she didn't like him because he'd caught her staring at him while he was snoozing. That's when Yuna gave a playful kick to the back of Dom Kang's leg and politely told him to zip it. On the way home, Jay was riding along when he heard a noise coming from the tires. Jay pulled over to check it out and realized his bike finally had a flat. That's when TJ and his crew showed up asking Jay if he needed a hand with that piece of junk. Jay, barely recognizing TJ with those glasses and his weird face, asked if TJ even remembered him. Dom Kang was walking along feeling pretty proud of himself since he'd gotten Yuna's attention, even if his body was sore from it. Since he'd napped way too long during class, he had to hustle to make it to work on time. That's when Dom Kang spotted Jay in the distance, the same guy who wouldn't let him ride the bike earlier. Dom Kang noticed Jay wasn't alone. Some troublemakers looked like they were giving him a hard time. TJ asked if Jay had a good sleep, because TJ certainly hadn't, and his forehead was still killing him. Jay, having no clue who he was talking to, asked TJ who he was. That sent TJ into a rage, thinking Jay was mocking them, or just blowing them off. Kicking Jay's bike, TJ accused him of acting all high and mighty, just because he'd won with that heap of scrap metal. Watching his bike hit the ground, Jay couldn't hold back anymore. TJ ranted that Jay had humiliated him in front of everyone, with that pile of junk. And now he was acting like he didn't even exist. But Jay wasn't in the mood to listen. He clocked TJ right in the jaw to shut him up and pay him back for kicking his bike. At first, Jay didn't really look like much of a fighter, since that punch barely even fazed the guy. Still, it was enough to send TJ and his goons into a blind rage. They jumped Jay, giving him a brutal beatdown and stomping his glasses into the dirt. Then TJ crouched over Jay, sneering and asking him how he planned on showing his face in class tomorrow. TJ kept goading him, asking if he remembered him yet, but even after all that, Jay just blanked on him. TJ growled that maybe Jay needed another lesson to jog his memory. That's when Dom Kang stepped in, grabbing everyone's attention with his sheer audacity. TJ didn't have a clue who he was, so he just wrote him off as some total loser. Dom Kang piped up, calling them out for how pathetic it is that bullies always need to roll 3-on-1. With that, he dropped his backpack to the ground, without even cracking his knuckles. Dom Kang calmly declared he was jumping into the fray. TJ scoffed, asking if this guy was lost. That's when TJ's buddies started whispering, frantically asking if he seriously didn't know who that was. His eyes went wide as they muttered about Dom Kang warning him that this guy was dangerous. The vibe shifted instantly. Whatever they told him, it worked. TJ backed off. TJ glared at Jay, muttering that he couldn't stand losers like him in this school. He added that Jay should thank Dom Kang for saving his skin, calling him lucky. Then TJ and his crew took off, before things could blow up any further. Dom Kang realized he wasn't just impressive, he was flat out intimidating. The mere sight of him had sent TJ running. Dom reached out a hand to help Jay up, but Jay just completely blew him off. After pulling himself up, Jay muttered that he was fine and told Dom to just forget it and get lost. A confused Dom touched his hair, wondering why everyone acted like they couldn't stand him. Nearby, Mino was walking with two girls, planning to hit up karaoke. But right in their path, Mino ran into TJ, who had some history with him. Before heading out, TJ made a sarcastic jab about how nice it must be to have all that cash, implying that was the only reason Mino had girls following him around. Still, Mino killed the plans with the girls the second he saw TJ. He apologized to them, promising to reschedule their karaoke night. The girls looked visibly annoyed. Dom Kang was trying to tell Jay that his bike was totaled and he was in rough shape. That's when Mino stepped in, looking shocked, asking what happened to Jay's face. Did he get into a fight? Dom explained that some jerks from another school jumped Jay. When Dom stepped in and cut them off, TJ knew exactly what that meant. Those goons were definitely looking to get even. Jay snapped at TJ, asking if he was satisfied with the answer, then told him to leave him alone. Mino felt guilty, apologizing for dragging Jay into this mess. Dom just told Jay to brush it off and never talk about that crew again. Still, he was worried sick about Jay's injuries and insisted he get to a pharmacy. Jay refused to take any handouts, but Dom doubled down, insisting that something was clearly wrong with him. Dom even offered to walk him home, but Jay flat out told him to stay out of his business. Frustrated by the standoff, Dom decided to take drastic measures. He stepped forward, got right up in Jay's space, and with one swift move, knocked him out cold. Mino shouted, asking why he'd do that. It wasn't necessary. But Dom just shrugged it off, saying it was nothing compared to what Yuna would have done. Still, Mino couldn't believe he'd sucker punch a guy who was already hurt. Dom insisted that if he hadn't stepped in, they'd be arguing until the sun went down. Dom scooped Jay up, slung him over his shoulder, and started walking like it was nothing. He told Mino to grab the bike. When Mino asked where they were headed, Dom admitted he had no clue. It turned out neither of them had any idea where Jay actually lived. The girls nearby whispered about how rough Dom was being. Mino took off toward the pharmacy. He needed to pick up some meds and bandages for Jay. While he was gone, Mino noticed that Dom Kang had dropped something on the ground. Then, they both just stood there staring at an unconscious Jay, completely lost on what to do. Neither of them knew his address. As they wandered into a nearby neighborhood, they spotted someone looking at a phone screen showing a picture of a white cat. It was Keijo Jay's brother who was just passing through and planning to swing by home before heading off to class. A heated conversation from nearby caught Keijo's attention. He figured it was just some Sunny High bullies, but then he noticed someone lying unconscious right next to them. He took a closer look. Keijo's heart skipped a beat. He recognized that face. Who was this kid? That's when it hit him. It was his brother Jay. He gasped in shock, and the sound grabbed the attention of Dom and Mino, who were still brainstorming nearby. Dom Kang. He was sure he heard the kid whisper Jay's name, and Mino caught it too. A terrified Keijo froze, not knowing what to do, while the two guys stared him down. He was scared out of his mind that he was about to be their next target. Mino wondered if the kid knew Jay, while Dom Kang was convinced they were related, trying to avoid eye contact. Keijo mumbled that he didn't know the boy, and calmly started to walk away. Dom Kang wasn't buying it for a second. He was dead certain he'd heard the boy. He'd heard him say Jay's name. Mino watched him closely and felt a strange sense of familiarity. The kid reminded him of someone. Then Dom. Mino put the pieces together and realized the boy looked just like Jay, only younger. That's when they realized Keijo was lying. He was definitely Jay's brother. Dom and Mino couldn't believe it, even seeing his own brother passed out. Keijo was trying to act like a total stranger. Furious, Dom and Mino demanded to know why he was acting so cold and trying to run away. Dom Kang hoisted up the still unconscious Jay, and Mino grabbed the bike. The two of them started trailing Keijo. After a bit, everything finally clicked. Keijo realized they were actually his brother's friends. When asked why he'd ditch his own brother, Keijo explained he'd bolted because he assumed Dom and Mino were going to beat him up or something. Keijo insisted that he was the one who had to take care of Jay. That's when Dom Kang realized how selfish he'd been acting. Keijo noted that despite all the running and fighting, it looked like Jay had chosen his friends pretty well. Once they finally made it to Jay's place, they tucked him into bed, and Dom Kang started patching him up with bandages. After cleaning up Jay's forehead, Dom finished the tough job doing everything he could. Now, it was up to the patient to wake up. Keijo, however, couldn't wrap his head around his brother having such an annoying group of friends. Mino asked about the bandage under Dom Kang's nose, and Dom Kang revealed he had his own little secret. Curiosity getting the better of him, Mino pulled off the bandage to see what was hiding underneath. Seeing what was there, Mino joked that if the director saw that, Dom Kang would be in serious trouble. Mino asked Keijo if anyone else was home, his eyes scanning around the room. Mino noticed it was just a typical guy's room. He also saw Keijo checking what looked like security footage. Keijo explained he was just monitoring the place to make sure nothing got stolen. The more Keijo talked, the more. Mino thought he acted just like his own annoying brother. Dom and Mino poked around the room until they stumbled upon a picture frame showing Jay's uncle and a bike from back in the day, from when Jay was just a little kid. Mino leaned in to point out the frame, but Dom Kang thought it was weird how close he was getting to look at the photo. Dom Kang realized the kid in the picture couldn't possibly be Keijo, that annoying kid. Then they noticed the boy in the photo looked so sweet, and they realized it was Jay. Mino pointed out that Jay had been riding that same bike since he was tiny. He wondered why Jay even showed up to the race after dropping hints that he wouldn't. Dom Kang found it strange that Mino was whispering to himself. After watching him for a while, Dom Kang started to notice that the boy in front of him was slowly morphing into Yuna. Dom Kang figured he must be hallucinating because the guy looked exactly like her. Feeling awkward, Dom Kang wondered if he'd been spending too much time alone lately, considering he was just with Minu. And honestly, Dom Kang wasn't close enough with Jay to know that he and Yuna were actually twins. Minu was staring at a family photo, trying to figure out who the mystery boy in the picture was. Suddenly Jay, his face covered in bandages, woke up and demanded to know what the hell they were doing in his house, referring to Minu and Dom Kang. They traded nervous glances before asking if Jay had finally woken up and slept well. Jay got up, marched right over, and snatched the photo frame from their hands. Furious, he told them to keep their hands off his stuff and to get out. Minu quickly grabbed a mirror and shoved it in front of Jay's face, explaining he'd only brought him here to look after him. Dom Kang, looking smug, declared that he didn't need a thank you, because he was just doing his duty. In one swift move, Dom Kang ripped all the bandages right off Jay's face. Jay told them he wasn't in the mood for a fight. He was exhausted and just wanted them out of his sight. Dom Kang rested a hand on Jay's shoulder, asking if he was really going to kick them out like that. Minu. Dom Kang and the others decided Jay wasn't exactly being friendly, especially since they were only there to help. They figured it was time to open Pandora's box. They were dying to see what was on Jay's computer. Jay was livid, telling them to stay away from his PC, but they completely ignored him and went for it anyway. They did it. While Minu kept Jay pinned down, Dom poked through everything Jay had been studying on the computer with a judgmental grin. Dom Kong told Jay he was about to show him the dark path into a whole new world. Dom Kong added that Jay should be grateful they stopped by, but Jay still wasn't having it. He didn't want them messing with his computer. Meanwhile, Keijo thought it was probably better to just head to class, because he felt like he was wasting way too much time on these three. Finally, Dom Kong finished setting up the link. Dom Kong asked if they were ready, and right then Jay's brother burst through the door. Seeing what was on the screen, Jay's brother realized he was staring at the forbidden stuff. Everyone crowded around to get a look at what Dom Kong had pulled up on the computer. Even though he was blushing, just like the rest of them, Jay's brother was actually ticked off that these idiots had downloaded such useless files. He complained that his computer was a mess and hesitated for a second checking to see if anyone was coming before he could delete or hide the content. I'm back. This time, I'm back to deliver a message from their mother. A little further away, Minu and Dom Kong were talking about the video. Minu really liked Keijo's style and suggested they hang out more often. Minu and Dom Kong agreed to catch up at school the next day since they both had plans. That was when Minu remembered he had his part-time job right after school. Minu wanted to end the day on a high note. As his phone rang, Minu decided this was the perfect opportunity. Minu rounded up the crew and called an emergency meeting for that night, demanding everyone be there. It was crucial that TJ and his gang showed up. The whole group was gathered, just like Minu wanted, though plenty of them were grumbling about the meeting. Hearing the complaints, TJ just smirked and said if anyone had a problem with it, they should take it up directly with Minu. Some people started wondering if there was beef between Minu and TJ, since TJ's attendance had been specifically requested. Playing dumb, TJ replied that this wasn't the first time Minu had pulled something like this. However, June chimed in saying that regardless, Minu was the one who started the team, so he deserved to be heard. June added that there had to be a real reason for calling everyone together. At that moment, TJ pointed out that June was just backing up his friend from the same school. His words made June uncomfortable, but before he could fire back, he noticed Minu walking up. Minu looked incredibly serious, like something major had gone down. TJ, oblivious to Minu's mood, kept cracking jokes. Looking even more annoyed than when he first arrived, Minu straightened his jacket and slipped a ring off his finger. Minu declared that he was going to settle things with TJ once and for all. Without a second thought, he lunged forward and leveled a punch straight to the guy's face. The impact sent him crashing to the floor. He actually needed a hand just to get back up. Everyone was stunned. Nobody had a clue what was going on. People started shouting, demanding to know why Minu was acting so unhinged. Minu glared at him and snapped that he needed to stop bad-mouthing the team and pack his bags while he still could. The whole room went quiet, completely blindsided. They all wanted to know what the hell he meant. TJ fuming barked back at him, asking why he'd clocked him out of nowhere. Minu didn't miss a beat, telling him to quit playing dumb. He wasn't interested in keeping any dead weight around, especially someone like TJ who keeps targeting his own teammates. A smirk crept onto TJ's face as he asked if Minu was referring to the student council president, the guy he'd already called a loser. He insisted it was obvious that Minu hadn't realized who actually started the fight. Then TJ dropped the bomb, arguing that if anyone needed to get kicked off the team, it was Minu. Minu stood there confused for a second. Before it clicked, TJ was trying to take his spot. Standing nearby, his friend June watched the tension spiral into total chaos. TJ claimed that the rest of the team was actually more fed up with Minu than with him. Minu immediately challenged them all. If they had a problem, stop whispering behind his back and say it to his face, one by one. They voiced their grievances, complaining about being dragged into meetings without any heads up. They pointed out that since TJ wasn't technically part of the crew, he might actually have a point. They added that nobody should be kicked out without checking with everyone else first. Noting that Minu had forced them to gather at a specific time just to expel TJ, TJ turned to Minu, looking satisfied. Highlighting everyone's frustration, he brought up the fact that Minu hadn't been cycling lately because of his injured leg. He mockingly claimed that all Minu had been doing was hanging around with girls. He suggested that Minu should just start his own club at school, since his dad's money would make it easy for him. June stepped in, urging them to stop because they had crossed the line. Hearing all of this, Minu proposed a race to decide who would stay and who would leave the Zephyrus team. June thought it was a terrible idea. TJ loved the suggestion, wondering how Minu could even ride a bike, especially with an injured leg, but he figured beating him wouldn't be a problem anyway. TJ accepted the challenge and proposed a 3-on-3 race. It was settled. 3 riders from each side would go head-to-head, and the losers would have to leave. Minu said he'd be happy to take all 3 of them on by himself. However, June insisted on joining the team, knowing it would be too much for Minu's leg. Still, no one else stepped up to take the 3rd spot, turning this into a showdown between Sunny High and Mountain High. Teddy joked, asking if anyone else wanted to volunteer, for Minu's team adding that anyone willing to leave with those idiots was more than welcome. Silence was their only answer. So it was agreed that the competition would be Sunny High versus Mountain High. Satisfied, TJ was happy it was a 2-on-3 race. Minu, TJ, and June locked eyes for a moment. Meanwhile, school life can be pretty dull, often lulling students to sleep. That's exactly what happened to a young student who dreamed that a giant dragon appeared. After collecting magical spheres, the dragon was able to grant a single wish. The student wished for a perfectly proportioned body, just like Chris Hemsworth's. The dragon said that was easy. All he had to do was eat a specific mushroom. Feeling thrilled, he took a bite. After feeling intense agony, he transformed completely. Everywhere he went, he made young girls' hearts skip a beat. He became a handsome young man, wearing a classic Chesterfield coat, the kind that only tall men can truly pull off. These coats create a slim silhouette, but hide a muscular build. Every girl admired his posture, wanted a man like him, and asked if he had a girlfriend. Being very gallant, he told them he could charge their heartbeats as currency. They all agreed to pay by pressing his head against their ample chests. At least this way he could hear several hearts beating at once. The situation was so comfortable that he was drooling on his desk while sleeping. Gradually, someone called out to him from a distance. Slowly he opened his eyes and saw his classmate feeling miserable that it was just a dream. Shin Young asked him what that was about as he mumbled something about several girls pressing his head. When she pressed for details, he brushed it off, saying it was nothing, and thanked her for the milk carton that she had brought. He had a habit of calling her little one, which discouraged her a lot while he drank the milk. He imagined the sweet taste of calcium, making him grow taller. Just then a friend walked up to him, slapping an arm around his neck in a friendly headlock. That sudden move made him choke and spill most of the milk he was drinking. Someone wanted the girl to go somewhere with him, but another girl wouldn't let her pass. So he recorded the romance between friends without missing a beat, finding it very interesting. By the way, in the background, June and Minu asked Minu what he planned to do. The answer was obvious. Minu planned to win and kick him out of the group. June looked worried, wondering how Minu was going to pull that off when his leg hadn't even fully healed yet. Minu just laughed it off, saying his doctor told him that some light cycling would actually speed up the recovery. Still, June warned him that a little bit of biking wasn't going to cut it for the actual race. He added that with the relay format, they were at a huge disadvantage. June suggested they reach out for help from the student council president, Jay. Minu hated that idea. Minu didn't want to drag Jay into the team's messy drama, and June was starting to get really stressed out. Meanwhile, over in class, student council president Jay was bored, doodling little bikes in his notebook. He was deep in thought when someone slid an envelope onto his desk. He looked up and saw it was Mia. She looked at him and said it was something to help with his injuries. She seemed genuinely concerned, but Jay just shrugged it off, saying he never asked Mia to get him anything. Seeing Jay brush off her kindness like that, Mia slammed her hand on the desk. She told him that when a girl tries to show she cares, the least he could do is be decent and say thank you. Mia was honestly upset because her friend had been moping all morning after seeing Jay's beat-up face. Mia was feeling super awkward because of Yuna's comments, and things got a bit weirder when Dong Kong showed up giving Jay a friendly slap on the back. Then Dong Kang threw an arm around Jay's neck, asking if he was exhausted and if he'd been up late. Yuna looked shocked. She had no idea they even knew each other. Kang explained they'd been connected through a screen. Yuna didn't have a clue what Dong Kong was rambling about, and neither did Mia. A guy walked up and told Jay that a senior was looking for him out in the hallway. Dong Kong figured Jay was just becoming way too popular, but he brushed it off and went right back to doting on Yuna. Yuna was showered him with affection. Rumors were flying that the two were dating, and they were acting pretty strange. While some girls were busy gossiping about Yuna and Dong Kong, they didn't even notice the third-year guy, standing right there. When the girls finally saw him, they turned bright red. But June was a pretty chill guy. The girls scurried off, whispering about how handsome he was, though one of them mentioned she'd heard he wasn't interested in girls. June overheard them and felt super uncomfortable, since that wasn't the case at all. June's expression shifted, though, when he spotted Jay's bruised face. June still didn't know about the situation with TJ. That was when it hit. June. Maybe that's exactly why his friend Minu was so incredibly angry at TJ. June noticed the way Jay was looking at him and thought maybe Jay didn't recognize him at all. He even started to wonder if Jay had some kind of face blindness. So June spent the next 5 minutes explaining who he was and exactly how they knew each other. It actually worked. Jay finally put the pieces together and remembered they'd met before. June took the chance to ask for a favor and filled him in on what Minu had been up to. After seeing the look on Jay's face, June told him he didn't want to drag him into his mess anymore, but he just couldn't bring himself to abandon his friend. Jay cut him off dead serious and said he was done being involved with their crew. June tried to reason with him, explaining that everything had become completely twisted and that if Minu lost, he'd be kicked off his own team. Jay didn't even blink, asking why he should even care. Still, June let it slip that the race was going down that night at 8 o'clock, at the same spot as last time. June added that if Jay had a change of heart and decided to step up, he'd be there. The gang was already gathered at the starting line, the air thick with talk of who was going to take the win. The loser would be exiled from the group, and you could feel the pressure mounting. A little ways off, June sat on a bench tightening his shoelaces. Minu was feeling pumped and called out to June, telling him it was time to get this show on the road. In truth, it was already 8 minutes past the start time, and June realized he had been waiting on Jay. June started losing hope that Jay would show up, and without him, things looked pretty bleak. TJ's team was feeling cocky, knowing their 3-on-2 numbers gave them the upper hand right from the jump. June noticed TJ had slapped a brake on his bike, probably still spooked by that wreck in the last race. John also asked if TJ had swapped his front wheel for an 8mm carbon one. TJ, being his usual self, started cracking sarcastic jokes, pointing out that Minu hadn't touched a bike in ages. With a smug laugh, TJ told Minu to take it easy, or else he might end up hurting his other leg too. Fed up with TJ's constant jabs, Minu decided it was high time to kick off the race. Before they could start, the rules were reviewed, but everyone's attention shifted to a girl rolling up on a scooter. She instantly grabbed every guy's attention with a bold entrance as she flipped off her helmet. She chirped that she was glad she made it on time and introduced herself as Harley. She explained that she was a host for a cycling show on the web channel, Paprika TV. She'd caught wind of the race and decided to check it out. As she shook out her hair, Harley revealed a stunning face that had all the guys blushing. She also mentioned that she hoped to stream the race live if everyone was cool with that. Minu, ever the charmer, declared it would be an honor to have such a beautiful woman documenting the event. TJ was thrilled at the idea, excited to humiliate Minu online. Harley quickly checked her 4G connection and fired up her live stream. As usual, the viewers found it addictive to watch such a high-stakes race live, knowing it would decide who got kicked out of the group. The official explaining that the race had been briefly paused by the arrival of Harley got things back on track. He explained that this would be a standard relay race, where participants would hand off the baton. Instead of physical batons, they'd be using LED bracelets. When enough pressure was applied, they would snap right onto the wrist. He demonstrated how to lock it by pressing down on the right spot. In short, the racers had to drop the bracelets at designated spots, and the first team to complete the handoffs would take the win. The losing team, as everyone knew, was getting cut from the group. They asked the leader of the losing team if he was really ready to go head-to-head. He didn't quite catch the question, But with a 3-on-2 advantage, the race already looked completely lopsided. The leader then told them to stop sweating it, claiming it didn't matter if the other team had more members. They all agreed that at the end of the day, no one could complain about it being unfair. The competition kicked off, and a member from each team stepped up to grab their bracelet. Right from the start, Minu would be facing off against TJ. Both of them were already going at it, lunging for their bracelets. Harley announced to her audience that the showdown between Sony High and Mountain High was about to begin. She declared that she was ready to film and share every second with the viewers. TJ was locked in, ready to teach the loser from the rival school a lesson. The first racer for Mountain High would be Young Min, and his opponent would be June. Minu noted that the first section of the track was full of sharp curves, meaning the bike wouldn't offer much of an advantage. June was stressed about whether he could muscle through the last 2 legs with his leg in its current state. The real issue was that June didn't know if TJ would be the second or third rider, and he had to figure that out one way or another. With no other options, June's friend agreed to provide support for the match, ahead, letting June focus entirely on his own performance. June then told his friend not to push himself too hard, since June was already prepped to start and handle the rest of the course. The racers lined up at the starting mark while those sitting out watched the broadcast on their phones. Harley, camera ready, moved into position. It was announced that just like in previous races, the competition would start the moment the equipment hit the ground. The guy with the gear ready, holding it between his fingertips, prepared to let it drop slowly to the floor. The second the equipment touched the ground, both of them took off like a shot. The race kicked off with pure intensity. June got off to a flying start, while Harley captured every heart-pounding second on his live stream. He was glued right behind him on his bike, a camera strapped to his helmet. It was easy to spot the blue armband, marking the Mountain High team, while the red one belonged to Sunny High. Suddenly, Mountain High surged ahead. The whole race was streaming live, and fans from all over the place were blowing up the chat. Even the crowd waiting at the finish line was watching every move, tracking their sheer effort. With every pedal stroke, June pushed hard, but he just didn't have Minu's raw skill, and he was struggling to keep the pace. The Sunny High rival started taunting him, sneering, "Is that really all you've got?" Even though he could clearly see the sweat and effort June was pouring. In the Sunny High rider pushed hard to close the gap, and almost pulled it off. The guy from Sunny High got suspicious, thinking June was up to something, because he didn't snap back at the insults. June stayed ice cold and silent, deciding it was smarter to focus on widening the lead. The rival started pedaling, harder than ever to hold on to the front spot. The leader was going absolutely all out. Still, the gap between him and the runner-up wouldn't budge, even though he was technically in the lead. The pressure on the leader was becoming suffocating. It looked like the second-place rider could overtake him at any heartbeat. That's when the lead rider realized the guy behind him was using a drafting technique. Even though June looked calm, he had a strategy. Harry, the commentator, caught on to the drafting too, and quickly explained to the audience that this move slices right through the wind. It's a classic technique used to cut down air resistance in motorcycle and bike racing. In the cycling world, they call it drafting. The commentator called it a genius strategy for a high school race. The crowd thought June was just coasting behind the leader, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Still, passing June wouldn't be a walk in the park. Since Minu, nobody thought it was even possible. However, the rival rider was convinced that once they cleared that last hill, the conditions would shift in his favor. When the Sunny High rider finally zoomed past June, he sarcastically thanked him for breaking the wind. That made June's opponent absolutely livid. But what really stung was the overtake itself, which officially put the Sunny High guy in the lead. At the end of the day, it all came down to pure muscle power. The leader clicked into a higher gear, pedaling with every ounce of energy in his soul. Those watching from behind spotted the shift and realized he'd just leveled up his speed. The word went out that the Sunny High rider, the one with the red armband, had snatched the lead. It was a massive shock. The Sunny High rider blew past his rival. Especially on the incline, he slowly started leaving the Mountain High competitor in the dust. The gap began to widen, growing too massive to bridge in such a short time. June's friends watching the feed were stunned. Meanwhile, the rival fighting for second place couldn't wrap his head around how June climbed that fast. Further up, the two riders who had already finished their relay legs were getting ready for the final stretch. The hum of Harry Lee's scooter grew louder as it approached. It was a sign that they were closing in on the finish line. Minu told his teammate to get ready and wished his opponent luck, thinking his guy might still make a comeback. Minu had no idea what he was talking about, totally clueless about who would hit the finish line first. Minu asked Ji-won if his teammate could actually top June, and then the worst-case scenario happened. Minu saw with his own eyes that it wasn't his teammate approaching, but June. June pointed ahead, and Minu quickly spotted the rider tearing toward them. This left Ji-won completely rattled, because it meant a huge disadvantage for his team. June was out in front, totally alone. Minu watched with pride, knowing exactly what June was capable of, and June shot him a smile back. With that burst of positive energy, Minu told his opponent they'd reach the finish line any second now. June ripped off his armband, ready to tag his teammate, and wished Minu good luck, then took off, determined to seal the win. The commentator piped up, noting that the second rider from Sunny's school had already snagged the relay bracelet, and he was off taking the lead. Their friends watching the live stream figured if Minu could just keep his pace, he was going to take the win. Harry, perched on her scooter, was positioned right behind the Sunny school rider. She saw that the Sunny school guy was way out in front, leaving the other rider in the dust. Soon, he would be hitting the third and final leg of the race. All the team members watching the feed noted how fast he was flying, likely well aware that Minu and June were a duo. Meanwhile, June was downing an energy drink to get his head in the game. Even though he looked like he was zoned out, June was just praying that his friend wouldn't push himself too hard and aggravate that old injury. That worry kept gnawing at him, pulling up memories of the crash that left Minu with a brutal leg injury. June couldn't shake the flashback, right until he looked up and spotted a familiar face standing right in front of him. Out on the track, Minu was giving it everything he had, terrified that if he failed, June would get kicked off the team too. But midway through, Minu's leg started throbbing, and the pain became absolutely blinding. Back at the exchange point, waiting for the second rider, TJ was chomping at the bit for his turn. TJ lost his cool when some random spectator watching the race mentioned that he might be the one getting kicked off the squad. The rival school was already in the lead, and TJ was boiling with rage, seeing how smug the competition looked. TJ assumed his teammate was closing in to hand off the bracelet, or at least that's what he wanted to believe. But then he caught a flash of red, and his heart sank. It wasn't his teammate. It was the rival rider, and the gap was already too wide to close. Everyone watching could see the speed was insane. It looked less like a bicycle and more like a motorcycle. TJ was livid at his teammate, who should have arrived way earlier during the rougher stretch of the course. Way back, gasping for air and completely drained, TJ's teammate, the one supposed to pass the bracelet, was struggling just to pedal with any kind of strength. On their phones, the live viewers were losing their minds, realizing the Sunny school team had already hit the final straightaway. Meanwhile, the Mountain School team was still lagging behind with their second rider. Back home, drying off after a shower to keep up with the updates, the commentator noticed the gap between the teams was just blowing wide open. That brought a smile to Minu's old friend, who apparently still held a soft spot for their old bond. Out on the track, Minu was pedaling desperately, ignoring the searing fire in his leg. Suddenly, as he started picking up speed, Minu caught sight of a cat in the middle of the road, messing around with a ball. It was way too late to stop. As Minu tried to slam on the brakes to avoid the cat, he put too much strain on his injured leg, worsening the tear in his leg support. Minu crashed to the ground with a sickening thud. The commentator described every harrowing second of the accident, leaving everyone watching the live stream in complete shock. June, his loyal friend, was absolutely devastated, while Minu lay on the asphalt, realizing his race was over. The commentator rushed over to provide emergency first aid to Minu and announced that the broadcast would be temporarily cut due to the crash. She shut down the live stream, leaving all the viewers hanging. June knew deep down that Minu never should have been racing like that, especially with a bum leg. Oblivious to the wreck, he kept pedaling as hard as he could, thinking he still had a fighting chance to close the gap. Further down the road, to his utter shock, he spotted Minu's bike sprawled on the ground, and the commentator tending to him. This was a glorious moment for TJ, who couldn't help but smirk, even though he knew this outcome was inevitable from the start. Racing on a busted leg was a massive gamble, though he had assumed his luck was unmatched. Minu, still pinned to the ground, struggled to make out who was hovering over him. Slowly, his blurry vision cleared. Harry leaned in and asked if Minu could get back on his feet. Rolling onto his side, Minu noticed someone else who asked what he was doing down there. Minu told him there was no need to stare, and that he could just send the message. Jay reached down and snatched the wristband right off Minu's arm. Both Minu and the commentator were totally confused. However, without missing a beat, Jay strapped the wristband onto his own arm. He remembered he had already left some food for his little brother along with a note saying he was just heading out to fix his bike, and that he'd be back soon. Yet his little brother seemed to see right through whatever game Jay was playing. June quickly laid out the rules and the course to Jay. But Minu kept insisting that Jay didn't need to do this. Jay gave him a serious look and told him not to get the wrong idea. He was only doing this because he had some business to settle. Minu knew that wasn't the whole truth, so he forced a smile. In that moment, Minu called out to Jay and tossed him his helmet. Minu told Jay to go and teach those losers a lesson. Jay stared at the helmet, questioning if he really needed to wear it since it was soaked in sweat and smelled awful. Minu, picking up on Jay's disgust, griped that his own helmet smelled just fine, while Jay's was totally unbearable. June, realizing that Minu and Jay were well enough to bicker, decided to stay put as she prepared to resume the race. As she reached for her scooter, she caught a glimpse of the bike she'd recognized earlier. Meanwhile, further ahead, TJ was practically singing as he neared the finish. "I can crush all this struggle," he thought. "The race is way too easy." It felt great. TJ stopped being annoyed by Minu and actually felt a little pity for him. He shouldn't have tried to race, while injured anyway. TJ found it pretty pathetic that he'd have to finish the race alone. Back on the ground, Minu, feeling strangely upbeat, thought TJ was about to panic because a monster was closing in fast. And TJ realized it immediately. He couldn't believe that another rider had caught up to him. The speed was absolutely freakish. Looking closer, he realized it was Jay. TJ's eyes went wide in disbelief. He had no idea what Jay was doing out here. That's when it hit him the race wouldn't be the cakewalk he had imagined. TJ started pedaling like a madman, knowing that if he didn't, the other school would take the win. He realized the guy chasing him, with such raw skill, was a beast. He felt like he was being hunted by a rabid dog. There wasn't much distance left. TJ figured he'd come way too far to just lose like this. He convinced himself he wouldn't get past on the descent. Pushing forward, TJ decided that to lock in the win, he just had to outpace Jay on the downhill. Feeling the relentless pressure from Jay, a sweat-drenched TJ stuck to his plan exactly as he had mapped it out the moment he hit the downhill section. However, TJ knew it wouldn't be that simple. As TJ began to bomb down the hill at breakneck speed, flashbacks of the previous accident flooded his mind. The terror of another collision overwhelmed TJ, forcing him to slam on the brakes and forfeit the little lead he had left. Meanwhile, Jay was an absolute animal on the descent. For him, brakes just didn't exist. Well, literally, since Jay's bike didn't even have them. But they couldn't care less. Jay just pulled off a sick maneuver on the descent, executing a 180-degree drift. Moves like that were just another Tuesday for Jay. And just like that, once the trick was done, Jay kept pushing forward, leaving TJ in the dust. TJ, seething with frustration, knew that one slip-up would cost him the race and get him kicked off the team. The leader Jay let out a long sigh and came to a dead stop. TJ noticed Jay stopping up ahead and felt his gaze locking onto him. TJ demanded to know what Jay's deal was, shouting at him to get out of the way. Jay stood there, staring down TJ, who had no choice but to slam on the brakes. TJ prayed he'd stop in time to avoid slamming right into Jay, but that wasn't in the cards. Jay, meanwhile, didn't show a hint of emotion. TJ skidded to a halt just inches away from a total wipeout, boiling over. TJ wanted to know if Jay had lost his mind pulling a stunt like that. Jay just fired back, saying he was only there because TJ had kicked his bike the day before. The question came out of nowhere, catching TJ completely off guard. Jay pressed on, saying he wanted to settle the score, once and for all, and see who was actually faster. So TJ wanted a challenge. Fine, especially since Jay was looking to return the favor. Jay declared it was a no-rules race until the finish line. Glancing at TJ, Jay sneered, wanting to see if that carbon fiber ride of his was really as fast as it looked. TJ thought it was a joke. There was no way that piece of junk could ever outperform his high-end bike. Jay looked back, remarking that when all is said and done, TJ shouldn't blame the bike, he should blame himself. And TJ, hating the vibe of this conversation, told Jay to shut his mouth and just go. They both lined up, squared off at the starting point, and took off like a shot. Both were dead set on going all out to leave the other behind. At first, TJ's carbon bike held a lead just by a hair. TJ smirked, watching his opponent lag, but it looked like Jay was only just warming up. The real race was about to kick off. Jay poured so much power into his pedals that he surged forward with insane momentum, blowing right past TJ. TJ couldn't believe he was losing to this guy who came out of nowhere to snatch his victory away. Meanwhile, the team members spotted Minu and his friend June making their way back. They were worried about Minu, wondering if he was really in as bad shape as it looked. Minu admitted he felt like garbage for blowing the race, confessing that his leg hadn't fully healed yet. June reminded Minu that he'd warned him about doing something so reckless, because putting that much stress on his leg was just irresponsible. Shoulders slumped, Minu acknowledged that racing on an injured leg was a huge mistake. Harley pointed out that Minu was lucky he didn't end up worse off after crashing at such a high speed. The other two on TJ's team were ready to celebrate, thinking they'd already won. But then they squinted and noticed someone approaching, next to Jay, waving a red flag. They were confused. Who could that be? Their team only had 2 members, and they didn't know anyone else from the Sunny School team. Jay had taken the lead, and there was nothing TJ could do about it. For TJ, this was it. It was all over. He just couldn't wrap his head around why his expensive bike couldn't keep up with his opponent's supposed piece of trash. As they crossed the finish line, everyone was stunned, but they quickly recognized the rider with the red flag. It was the Sunny School Student Council president, the same guy who had raced against TJ before. He was known for being cold and aloof, and immediately protests erupted with people shouting that the race was unfair. The match had been 2 against 3, and as Jay rolled across the finish line, his face remained completely expressionless. Meanwhile, TJ was visibly crushed. After losing to the same rival yet again, he yanked off his helmet and muttered that clearly the trash wasn't his bike. TJ was fuming, taking that comment as a direct insult that he was the garbage. Just as TJ looked ready to start a brawl, people reminded him that the guy wasn't even on their team. No one could wrap their heads around why this outsider had joined the Sunny School squad just for this race. It made 0 sense for someone from outside the team to interfere, but Minho clarified that he'd agreed from the start. Even before the race began, they knew it would be a 3 versus 2 setup regardless of the outcome. Minho added that the moment he fell off his bike, it was already over for them. And with a smile, he told TJ there was no need to keep running his mouth. Minho simply ripped the team emblem off his jacket and tossed it to the ground. Everyone watched in silence. Some felt a pang of sadness, while others thought he'd gone too far. Before walking away, Minho glanced back and commented that he hoped they were happy now. He told them to take care of the team, casting one last, sad look at a few members, knowing there was nothing more he could do. June placed a hand on Minho's shoulder, and together they left. Minho felt terrible about the loss, and as a result, June had to walk away from the team with him, though June didn't seem to mind. They could just start fresh and build a new team. But shortly after, Jay tossed a helmet toward Minho. Catching it, Minho thanked Jay for his support during the race, but Jay didn't say a word. He just ignored Minho, turned away, and pedaled off, making Minho realize that Jay hadn't changed a bit. Holly noticed something peculiar about Jay. He was riding a bike inherited from someone she knew very well. Minho started to walk, even though his leg was still throbbing with pain, and June offered to take him home, but Minho insisted. He didn't want to be coddled like a kid claiming his place was just nearby, despite the victory. In the race, TJ wasn't celebrating. This was the second time he'd tasted the sting of defeat. His friends asked if he was coming with them, but TJ was lost in his own dark thoughts. He was obsessing over the humiliation, and what everyone would say about him losing when someone approached and commented on the look of bitterness on his face. TJ, ready to snap, looked up to fight, but held back when he saw who it was. Vinny Hong asked if TJ was the idiot who'd been trying to challenge him, and seeing Vinny made TJ feel a sudden sense of relief. It had been a long time since he'd seen his friend. TJ smiled and asked what Vinny was doing there, and Vinny replied, with a joke asking if he wasn't allowed to show his face, and TJ quickly backtracked. He didn't mean it like that, and Vinny explained he'd been watching the race, and noted that Minho's legs seemed to be healing up fine. However, TJ's friends chimed in, saying Minho was nothing but a loser now, explaining to Vinny that they had won the race, and as promised, Minho had been kicked off the team. Vinny quipped that once the cat's away, the mice will play, eyeing the three guys who'd faced off against Minho's team. They looked like small fry. Vinny mentioned that Minho's team had been dissolved, and there was nothing left to do all the while. TJ was still fuming that Minho wasn't on his team anymore. Vinny seemed genuinely curious about Minho's next move, remarking that Minho looked solid during the race, though Vinny warned him to take it easy on that leg. Then Vinny dropped the bomb that he was quitting his own team, leaving TJ completely confused. A few petals later, Minho and June reached the front of Minho's house. Minho was still crushed by the loss, and losing his spot, feeling completely betrayed by his own team, thinking, if only I hadn't hurt my leg. At that exact moment, Minho's parents pulled up, and Minho's gaze locked with his father's. Minho greeted him, but his father immediately barked at him, demanding to know what on earth he was doing out here. Minho's father demanded answers, wanting to know exactly what had been going on instead of studying. Trying to smooth things over, Minho's stepmother brushed it off as just a typical rebellious teenage phase. But then she spotted a nasty cut on Minho's face and gently reached out to ask how he'd gotten hurt. She leaned in closer to check the wound, innocently wondering if he'd just taken a spill off his bike. Minho snapped, telling her to get her hands off him, leaving her completely stunned. She never expected such a rude outburst, especially right in front of his father, who immediately moved to discipline him. His father lashed out, striking him, and repeatedly calling him a good-for-nothing punk. He lectured Minho about showing respect as the eldest son, but Minho couldn't have cared less. Furious, Minho accused his stepmother of only being after his father's money and taking advantage of his mother being gone. His father fired back, accusing Minho of wasting his hard-earned cash, even bringing up the bike he'd bought him. Screaming in rage, his father demanded he hand over his wallet and every single credit card, a move made out of pure defiance. Minho slammed the wallet onto the floor, declaring he didn't want a dime of his father's money. The father, pushed to his breaking point, kicked him out of the house for good. Meanwhile, Minho's twin sister was watching it all unfold from the window, her heart breaking at the sight of the bitter fight. She pulled back, whispering to herself that it was all her fault, while somewhere else in a quiet corner, Minho sat on a bench by a vending machine, with his bike deep in thought. He had zero cash and nowhere to go. It had been an absolute nightmare of a day, cut from his team and now kicked out of his own home. To make matters worse, he watched the happy family walk by, twisting the knife in his chest. Seeing those kids laughing reminded him of the days when he was still close to his mom and sisters. The beautiful memory of his mother was the only thing giving him comfort during these dark times, as he and his twin sister had once been so incredibly close. He still remembered the solemn promise he'd made back then that he would always take care of his mom and his sisters. Minho used to be such a kind, cheerful kid, living in a home overflowing with genuine love. But now all he could do was sit on that bench next to his bike and sob, tears streaming down his face. He felt lost in the chaos, until he heard someone nearby grabbing an energy drink. It was a guy at the vending machine, and when Minho glanced over, he caught him staring right at him. The guy asked sarcastically if Minho was crying like a baby after taking a loss. Minho snapped back that he definitely wasn't crying. The guy just gave him a skeptical look, clearly not buying it for a second. He turned his back to walk away, but Minho was desperate. He had to ask for a favor. When he finally got the guy's attention, the guy asked what he wanted. Desperate and feeling like he had no other options, Minho asked if he could crash at his place for the night. The guy just walked off without saying a word. Minho didn't give up calling out that it would only be for one night, explaining that he had no money and had just been tossed out of his house. The guy just shrugged and said it wasn't his problem. Minho thought he was a heartless jerk, but he kept pushing anyway. He promised it would only be that one time, but Jae just shook his head and said he had to get back to studying. He suggested Minyu ask someone else for help, but Minyu countered that he didn't have anyone left. Jae made it crystal clear that he wasn't the guy to help him out. That was the moment it hit Minyu. They were just classmates and nothing more. Facing this harsh reality, Minyu finally understood that he was truly on his own. He had no team, no home, and he realized the few people who ever bothered with him only cared about his family's social status and bank account. Nobody around him actually gave a damn about him as a person. They were only interested in his father's wealth hanging around because they knew he was the son of a high-profile businessman. To keep things simple, Minyu had been wearing a mask every time he dealt with anyone too. His father was always surrounded by lies and fake people. That was the world Minyu had grown up in. Because of that, Minyu started hiding his true self, putting on countless masks to blend in. But since he was a kid, he realized that whenever he finally took those masks off, he was left completely alone. Minyu discovered a way to escape his loneliness. He got a bike. It became his sanctuary, and he developed a real passion for cycling. Eventually, he formed his own cycling crew. At first, the group was just a bunch of people who loved to ride. They called themselves the Zephyrus team. Unfortunately, Minyu lost his crew, and things went from bad to worse when it started pouring rain. Out of the corner of his eye, Minyu spotted a cat also caught in the downpour and shivering from the cold. Looking closer, Minyu realized he'd seen this cat before. He tried to figure out if it was the same one he'd accidentally knocked over once. For a second, Minyu felt a flash of anger toward the animal, but that faded fast when he saw its injured paw. Pity washed over him. Blaming the cat wouldn't fix anything, so he shared some of his food. Minyu noticed the feline was gentle, eating right out of his hand. Taking a closer look, Minyu realized that the cat couldn't run away because of its hurt leg. Minyu scooped up the wet, trembling cat in his arms and realized it was just as lonely as he was. Nearby, a boy with glasses and an umbrella was heading home. When the boy arrived, he found a young man standing in the rain outside his house. The boy recognized Minyu as one of the idiots who hung out with his brother, but he couldn't figure out what Minyu was doing there. Minyu recognized the boy too, and asked him sarcastically if he was that little pest from before. However, the boy's attention was locked on the cat, which seemed to be the real priority. Inside the house, the boy stared out at the rain, feeling moved by the whole situation. The boy grabbed an umbrella and went out to see the young man. To his surprise, the boy saw his brother, walking in with the cat in his arms. Curious, the boy asked where the cat came from. His brother explained that the poor thing was shivering in the rain, so he brought it inside. Hearing that, Minyu started to feel a bit of sympathy for the boy, who showed genuine concern. However, the boy made it clear he couldn't leave the cat out in the cold, and that he had brought Minyu in, only because they were together. Minyu realized it was a mistake to expect too much from this annoying kid. Jae, meanwhile, watched his brother as he carefully cleaned the cat and fixed it some food. Then Jae found himself face to face with Minyu, who was now inside his house. Minyu told Jae he would leave as soon as the rain stopped. Then he went quiet. Suddenly, a towel was tossed onto Minyu's head. Jae gestured toward the bathroom and told Minyu to take a shower. Though surprised, Minyu seemed to appreciate the gesture, even if he didn't show much reaction. Jae quickly added that this was just for today, and that Minyu shouldn't expect anything more from him. Regardless, Jae's younger brother found it strange to let Minyu sleep in their house even, if Minyu insisted that he wasn't homeless. After his shower, Minyu felt refreshed. There was nothing better than a hot shower and a clean home. Minyu announced he was starving and didn't hesitate to open the fridge to look for food. At that moment, Minyu heard footsteps and a woman asking if there was a bike outside that she didn't recognize. When she walked into the kitchen, Jae's mother was shocked to see Minyu digging through the fridge. Startled, Minyu greeted the lady politely. Seeing Minyu, the woman realized who he was, the son of one of the city's high-profile figures. She quickly fixed him a meal and told Minyu to make himself at home. Minyu was thrilled because fried chicken with sauce was his absolute favorite. Satisfied, Jae's mother asked how he managed to make such a precious friend. Jae simply replied that they weren't friends. Jae's younger brother then reminded their mother that she always said friends were useless. Trying to shut him up, Jay's mother tossed a chicken drumstick at her youngest son. She told her youngest to finish eating quickly and go study since exams were coming up. Suddenly, Jay's mother heard a meow. Looking toward the stairs, she spotted a cat and asked where it came from. Jay's younger brother. Already being scolded, he pointed at Minu, pinning the whole mess on him. Since he had brought the cat over, Jay's little brother blamed Minu for everything and rushed to hug the cat tight. The kitten was already named Jack. Jay and his mom realized the boy had already claimed him, trying to play it cool. Jay's mom smiled and told her youngest son that they really should return the cat. Once their guest had left the boy, his mouth still a total disaster, covered in sauce, held onto the cat for dear life, acting as if he'd do exactly as his mother said. Noticing the look on the faces of Jay and Minu, she asked if they had been fighting. Jay, desperate to dodge the question, quickly started gulping down a soda to avoid talking, shifting all the blame onto Minu. Minu stammered out a story claiming that he and Jay had gotten into a scrap with some other guys. Jay's mom flew into a rage, swearing she'd go after whoever was responsible, because nobody was allowed to mess with someone as precious as her son. She demanded to know which school those boys went to, but Minu stumbled, saying he wasn't sure because they were wearing plain clothes. Minu tried to calm her down by promising it wouldn't happen again. Jay stood up, quietly thanked his mom for dinner, and headed for his room, while Minu and his mother watched him. Jay's mom noted that his grades were slipping. She added that if it kept going like this, he wouldn't be allowed to ride his bike anymore. Jay just muttered that he understood and retreated to his room. Minu followed him in shortly after, since he had to crash there for the night. Spotting Jay at his computer, Minu asked what he was up to. Jay just shot him a glance and stayed silent. Moments later, Minu was already sprawled out on the bed. He groaned about being stuffed and how soft the bed was. Almost asleep, Minu mumbled that he figured Jay's life couldn't be that easy either, with his mom breathing down his neck to be the top of the class. But then Minu added that he actually envied Jay, because Jay had a mom who was actually around and doted on him. With that, Jay killed the lights and used his feet to shove the intruder right off his bed. Minu insisted he couldn't sleep without a bed, and suggested he might as well share it. Annoyed, Jay set up a spot on the floor to sleep instead. Surprisingly, Jay struck up a conversation, asking when Minu started cycling. Minu replied that it was back when he was a kid. He saw a guy riding in the park and thought it looked like a blast. Minu added that the guy must be really good at it by now. That's when Minu got the bright idea that they should form a cycling team together. Jay told Minu to quit talking nonsense and get some sleep, mostly because Minu was nothing but trouble. Minu thought Jay was always like that, and told him he needed to be more positive. Minu then mentioned he would be staying for a few more days. That caught Jay's attention, and he sat up to demand what Minu was talking about. Minu explained that Jay's mom said he could stay as long as he needed. That didn't sit well with Jay at all. Minu turned to the corner and messaged his sister, asking her to bring over some more clothes. Minu told his sister he was fine, that he was at Jay's place and would be sleeping there. His sister asked for the address to drop off the gear. Soon enough, sleep took over and Minu passed out. By morning, the smell of food cooking in the kitchen caught Minu's attention. Still half asleep, Minu went to check it out, but through his blurry, sleepy eyes, he thought he saw an elderly woman cooking. Once Minu finally snapped awake, he realized it was just Jay wearing a cat print apron. Jay explained that his mom had already left for work early. Minu couldn't hold back his laughter. He found the whole scene hilarious. He asked if it was some kind of cosplay. Minu joked that he had to snap a photo and post it on social media, but he was laughing so hard he couldn't even focus the camera. Minu then asked about Jay's little brother who was outside playing with Jack. Minnie found it strange that the guy was up so early just to mess with the cat, especially when he saw the meal Jay was whipping up. Minnie figured it was a special breakfast made just for him. He was already reaching for a spoon when he realized the food wasn't meant for him at all. Minnie asked Jay where the food came from, and Jay coldly replied that it was for the cat. Minnie griped, complaining that he was starving, and that Jay shouldn't be wasting his breakfast on a stray cat. Jay just shot back, telling Minnie to go fix his own breakfast if he was so hungry. Meanwhile, across town, the CEO of Sony AE was bracing himself for another long day at the office. His phone buzzed, and he wondered who would be calling at such an ungodly hour. Hearing the voice of Chili, his beloved daughter. He felt a surge of pride and immediately wanted to know how she was holding up. Sheely announced she was heading back to Korea and couldn't wait to see him. The CEO replied, with a beaming smile, saying he felt exactly the same. Sheely promised to call as soon as she touched down. The blonde stepsister with a bike in her room seemed to share the same obsession with cycling. Early that morning, Minu was tending to his bike, meticulously checking every single bolt. Minu was caught off guard when his sister Yuna showed up with the clothes he had asked for the night before. Yuna asked what he was doing, and Minu claimed he was just tuning up his bike, since it got soaked the previous day. Yuna, who was clearly annoyed by her brother's bicycle fixation, tossed him the bag of clothes and told him to stop being so stubborn and just come back home. Yuna insisted she would take care of their father, but Minu wasn't buying it. Looking surprised, Yuna remarked that it was bizarre for Minu to prefer crashing at Jay's place, and she certainly didn't expect Jay to be so decent to him. Minu explained that despite Jay's grumpy attitude, things were actually going fine. Yuna offered to drive him to school in the family car, but Minu, proud as ever, turned her down. Minu insisted on biking and even suggested that Yuna should start pedaling around too. Ignoring the advice, Yuna said she'd catch him later and warned him not to be late. Yuna hopped into the car and drove off toward school, leaving her brother and his bike in the dust. As Minu waved goodbye, Kay, who had been standing there the whole time, asked if Yuna was his girlfriend. Only then did Minu notice the guy was there. Outraged, Minu retorted that he'd never date someone that ugly, and clarified that she was his sister. Then he asked how long Kay had been lurking. Kay ignored the question entirely and started talking to the cat. Jack and Fifi were whispering, clearly thinking it was pathetic that Minu, a delinquent, squatting at someone else's place, had absolutely zero chance of having a girlfriend. Minu thought to himself that if Kay were his brother, he would have taught him a lesson by now. Grinning, Kay said goodbye to the cat, announcing he had to head to school and telling Jack to keep an eye on the house. Minu was left alone with the cat. Meanwhile, Jay was getting ready for school, ignoring Minu, though he did glance over whenever he was addressed. Minu asked if Jay would be biking to school today. Jay replied that he wasn't sure, and asked why it mattered. Minu said he was flat broke and couldn't afford the bus fare, so he'd be riding his bike, suggesting they go together since it would be way more fun. Jay just stared at him without a word. Before long, the two were hitting the bike path. Unused to the route, Minu complained about the terrible planning, calling it an obstacle course full of trees and fire hydrants. Jay, on the other hand, was completely unfazed since he rode that path every single day. Minu suggested cutting through the park instead, claiming it was a much smoother ride. Minu even joked about ditching class to keep riding, but Jay's deadpan expression made it clear that wasn't happening. Minu also noticed Jay wasn't wearing a helmet and offered to pick one up for him. Moments later, Minu remembered he had zero money and quickly dropped the idea. Jay was used to his friend's nonsense, telling him to stop babbling and just keep pedaling. Minu challenged him to a race to school, but Jay refused, saying he had enough competition to deal with once they got there. The mood was chaotic as usual, filled with voices. Mia seemed genuinely impressed by something Yuna was saying. Mia commented that she never imagined she'd see Minu and Jay getting along so well. Yuna agreed, noting that it certainly seemed that way, that they had only recently started seeing each other. Mia found Yuna's phrasing funny, and joked that she should be careful or others might get the wrong idea. Yuna reminded Mia about the student council meeting this weekend at a cafe. Mia loved the idea, but she wondered if Jay would actually approve of a meeting held off campus. Yuna explained that since most of the department heads are girls, they could easily pressure Jay into agreeing. Satisfied, Mia declared that this was her golden opportunity to score a date with her beloved Jay. Yuna made it clear she was helping Mia out, but she'd have to ensure they ended up alone. By the end of it, flustered Mia insisted she didn't need that much help. Overhearing their chat, Dong Kong chimed in, asking if he could tag along to the meeting. Annoyed, Yuna reminded him that he wasn't even on the council and asked what he expected to do there. Dong Kong offered to be her assistant, but Yuna just told him to stop being a goof. He persisted, inviting her to go see a zombie movie after the meeting. Mia, watching from a distance, thought the two of them actually looked good together. However, Yuna made it clear she wasn't into that kind of movie. Just then, Mia looked out the window and spotted Jay and Minu arriving on their bikes. She mentioned to Yuna how much she wanted to buy a bike, especially with the beautiful weather lately. Yuna suggested that when Mia finally gets one, she should ask Jay to teach her how to ride. Dong Kong, once again butting in, claimed he would buy a bike too. Yuna simply replied that she couldn't care less. When Minu rolled into school on his bike, he grabbed everyone's attention as per usual. Meanwhile, in a corner, two boys were buried in a magazine filled with pictures of pretty girls. The class president showed up, ruining their fun by insisting on keeping everything tidy. Annoyed, the two boys couldn't do a thing about it. That's when they noticed Minu bringing his bike into the room and parking it in the corner. Curious. One of the boys asked Minu why he brought the bike inside. Minu responded by asking if he had any idea how much the bike was worth, explaining he couldn't leave it outside. When the boy asked about the price, he was absolutely shocked by the amount Minu mentioned. He thought the price was ridiculous and joked that it might as well be made of gold. Despite that, the boy wanted to give it a try, but seeing the high seat, he gave up in frustration. In Jay's classroom, Yuna popped by to talk about the upcoming student council meeting. She informed him that everyone wanted it at a cafe and asked for his take. Jay didn't seem thrilled by the idea, but Yuna decided that's how it would be and left humming a tune. Later, Yuna told Mia everything went according to plan, reminding her to dress up and make a good impression. Just imagining it made Mia blush with nerves, since she wasn't used to getting all dolled up. Back in her room, Mia faced a major dilemma. What outfit would be perfect for such a special event? With clothes scattered all over the bed, she tried them on, one after another, staring in the mirror, struggling to decide. Her hair and makeup were another source of stress. Her moment of doubt was cut short by her phone buzzing. It was Yuna, calling to ask if she was ready, since she was already on her way to pick her up. Panicking, Mia replied she'd be ready in a few minutes. Without enough time to get ready properly, she grabbed a dress she thought looked okay and did her best, with the little time she had. Meanwhile, at Jay's place, things were quiet. Minu, bored out of his mind, complained about being broke and not having any fun this weekend. Outside, he watched couples go by who seemed obsessed with cats. When he saw Jay getting ready to head out, Minu asked where he was going. Jay explained he was heading to the student council meeting. Surprised, Minu wondered why anyone would have a meeting on the weekend and begged to come along, citing his boredom. Jay refused, saying he preferred to go alone. Dejected, Minu held the door, promising to watch the house and asking Jay to bring back something tasty. Like I was staring at ice, I didn't say a word back. The cafe where we were supposed to meet. The vibe was pretty chill, just a few people scattered around. One couple in particular looked like they were really hitting it off, but at Yuna's table, things were way more awkward. Yuna noticed Dom Kang nearby, totally fanboying over how good the bagels were. Mia showed up a bit late, looking flustered, muttering about not expecting everyone to be there already. She looked so polished and different that Dom Kang didn't even recognize her at first. That just made Mia even more self-conscious, until she told him he really should have known who she was by her voice. Yuna was super hyped to see Mia without her glasses, telling her she should rock contacts way more often. Mia thanked her for the sweet words, though she let her know it was just a one-time thing. One of the guys at the meeting, while busy flirting with his girlfriend, piped up about how gorgeous Mia looked without the specs. His girlfriend didn't like that one bit and snapped at him, calling him a total creep. Dom Kang watched the couple and asked Yuna if she'd ever want to bicker with him like that, but Yuna just brushed him off. At another table, Vinny was looking visibly annoyed. His crew was talking about some group over there that kept shooting them dirty looks. Vinny caught them whispering about how he looked, specifically his left eye, saying it was just a colored contact or some cheap cosplay. Done with the jokes, Vinny had the genius idea to stand up and call them out. He grabbed one of their cups of coffee, pretended to take a sip, and then complained that it tasted like straight-up vinegar. That turned every head in the room. Vinny then asked the group if his eye color was really that weird, or if it was making them that uncomfortable. He even sarcastically offered to rip his own eye out, just to prove it was the real deal. The guys at the table were stunned and told him to back off. With a friendly smile, Vinny kicked their table, causing a huge scene and sending one of them crashing out of his chair. The commotion caught the eye of Dom Kang, who was sitting with his buddies. Vinny kept the pressure on, putting his foot on the guy who'd fallen to the floor and asking if he wanted to see what else he could do. Then, Vinny accidentally splashed hot coffee all over another guy. Even though he claimed it wasn't on purpose, a girl from the group started begging someone to step in and stop the madness. But nobody moved. They all figured it was just another petty fight. Dom Kang saw the hot coffee spreading and tried to grab Vinny's hand to keep things from spiraling. Vinny, however, didn't like Dom Kang interfering at all and glared at him. The air turned ice cold when Dom Kang tried to play the peacemaker in the middle of all that tension. While he was trying to step in and tell everyone to chill, Vinny just kept pouring more hot drinks. He dumped the rest of it right on a guy. The same guy who'd been mocking Vinny's looks and his unusual eye color was now scrambling on the ground, whimpering like a dog. Totally terrified, he begged for someone to call the cops on this maniac. Vinny flicked Dom Kang's cap. He asked what the problem was. Dom Kang just locked eyes with Vinny. Vinny messed with his cap, but didn't actually hit him. Just then, Yuna got Dom Kang's attention. He heard her voice and turned around to see what she wanted. Yuna told Dom Kang to put his fists away and stay out of trouble, at least for today. Dom Kang fixed his hair, but didn't stop staring at Vinny, just in a different way. Meanwhile, Vinny's friend tried to step in, whispering to keep things from getting worse. He urged Vinny to just walk away before everything blew up. Vinny, being his typical chaotic self, stuck his tongue out at Dom Kang before heading out. As he walked away, he muttered that he'd finish this chat in a place that was a bit more private. Hearing the trash talk, Dom Kang leaned down, grabbed his cap, and put it back on. Then he walked over to Yuna and claimed he hadn't started any drama today. Yuna, looking satisfied, didn't give him a direct, "good job." She just gave him a nod, while somewhere else, the rhythmic clicking of high heels echoed through the room. A sophisticated suitcase stood out amidst the crowded street. Every man nearby couldn't help but stare, their jaws practically hitting the floor. The blonde woman, with her striking beauty, turned heads wherever she stepped. Even other women stopped in their tracks just to get a look. Some couples were even bickering as their partners shot her curious, disrespectful glances. Among the crowd, one man, brimming with self-confidence and convinced of his own charm, decided to make his move. After smoothing his hair and checking his reflection, he proudly bragged to his buddy about how gorgeous the European woman was. He claimed his French was good enough to handle the situation, then headed toward her, fully convinced his riz would do the trick. He told his friend not to sweat it, boasting that his strategy was 99% charisma and 1% basic French. His skeptical friend thought he needed a reality check, since the blonde beauty seemed way out of his league. The woman, catching the long, lingering stares, couldn't help but think how predictable and annoying most men were. When he finally approached trying to show off his French, she calmly replied that he could just speak Korean. Clearly weirded out by his behavior, she answered his questions about whether she spoke Korean and where she was from with total composure. The guy explained he was just sipping coffee when he spotted an angel and felt compelled to follow her. Then he asked if she had a boyfriend. Handing her his phone, he told her to punch in her number so they could keep in touch. She took his phone and typed something in just as a cyclist casually rode past. The woman was also seen tapping away on her own phone. Suddenly, two guys on a scooter zoomed up the one in front, wearing an Iron Man mask. The passenger signaled that their target was right in front of them. The blonde woman with that seemingly valuable suitcase, they lunged toward her. Even though she was still holding the guy's phone, she handed it back with total indifference, saying she'd send a message later. The confident man figured she was just playing hard to get. He was still dead certain he'd scored, but when he checked the number she'd supposedly entered, he realized it was a total fake. Just as he was staring at the screen, the two guys on the scooter sped up and snatched the woman's bag. With the bag acting as their trophy, they bolted away as fast as they could. The woman, clearly shaken by the robbery, tried to react, but it was no use. The cyclist, despite being hooded and pedaling hard, caught the whole scene. Even though he seemed in a rush, he appeared to have a clear destination in mind. After Director Jay's daughter saw the cyclist speed by in the wake of the scooter theft, she zoomed ahead at breakneck speed, desperate to know what they were up to. Nearby, some construction workers were taking a break, puffing on their cigarettes. They were shocked when Jay blew past them and snatched a hard hat. Now that he was well protected, he could pedal, even faster without risking his neck. Back at the cafe, the cleaning crew was tidying up for the next wave of customers. He figured that instead of making a mess, people could just enjoy their coffee in peace and head out. Some onlookers watched them clean, annoyed by the clutter they had to deal with. The young man, who had just been soaking up his girlfriend's affectionate attention, declared that if the situation hadn't been resolved, he would have handled it himself. Memories of his school days when he was known as a bloody punching bag likely flashed through his mind. Dom Kang then claimed he didn't want to fight, just scare people a little. Despite his talk, the girls were all impressed by his bravery. That's not how Yuna saw it, though. She told him he shouldn't act like a tough guy, because that wasn't real courage. He just hadn't thought things through. Still, Mia had something she'd been dying to ask him. She wanted to know if he was interested in finally revealing his true feelings for her. Flashing an awkward smile, she backtracked, saying that wasn't exactly what she meant, but rather why he always wore a bandage on his upper lip. He didn't find that very funny, and pointed to his lip, asking if that was what she was talking about. Yuna warned him that eventually someone would start asking questions. Mia was dying of curiosity, wanting to know what he was hiding under there since he always kept it covered. She was told this would be their little secret. He promised to show her, but he made it crystal clear that she couldn't breathe a word of it to anyone. Then as he peeled back the bandage, his secret was finally laid bare. However, the sight caught the girl off guard. All this time, he'd just been hiding a mustache underneath. It felt bizarre for a high schooler to be rocking a mustache already. One of the guys at the table thought it was honestly pretty cool. So much so that he started picturing himself with a mustache and beard, convinced it would make him look way more masculine. Mia was floored that he was still in high school and already sporting facial hair. The boy at the table started guessing, wondering if he had some secret weapon, maybe a miracle gel that gives any guy a more rugged, manly look. He begged Dom Kang to let him use it just once. Dom Kang shot him down immediately. He claimed the stuff was nearly impossible to score on the black market. The girls just didn't get it. Why would anyone go through all that trouble just to grow a mustache, only to keep it covered with a bandage? He finally broke it down. He explained that if the teachers found out, he'd be forced to shave it off on the spot. That's the only reason he kept it hidden. Mia finally clicked. That's why he was always so wiped out in class. He was exhausted from working his part-time job. One girl was curious about what his father did for a living, and whether he'd eventually force him into that kind of life too. He replied that his dad handled the administrative side of an organization. But honestly, from an outsider's perspective, that didn't seem to be the case at all. He looked more like a mafia boss, locking horns with other big-time mobsters. When they were all together, the vibe was intimidating, but as a gangster, he had to keep his cool. Regardless, his father was flying back to Korea that day. The girl pressed on, asking if his dad really worked in the office like some average civil servant, or something along those lines. He just let out a laugh, trying to shift the mood. Trying to dodge the conversation, Mia grabbed a ticket and announced she was going to get more coffee. She skipped away from the table, excited for her coffee, completely unaware that someone was snapping photos of her. It looked like someone was fixated on how she looked. To be fair, she was looking absolutely stunning. Meanwhile, the student council president was pedaling his bike at breakneck speed, wearing a borrowed helmet, hot on the heels of some thieves. The guys on the motorcycle thought they'd hit the jackpot, but then they realized someone was chasing them. They were floored. Someone was actually gunning for them on a bicycle. They couldn't wrap their heads around it. No one tries to catch a motorcycle on a bike, but when they glanced in the mirror, they saw him. He was actually closing the gap. They figured he'd never catch them on a basic bicycle. He'd have to be smarter than that. Still, Jay cranked his pedals harder, weaving through traffic to keep the bike in his sights, as Jay tore through the streets chasing the motorcycle whose riders had just snatched a bag. From a blonde woman, he proved he was no stranger to obstacles or rough terrain. He was effortlessly riding up ramps, hopping over small walls and dodging cars. Nothing could slow him down. Taking a shortcut to cut those criminals off was second nature to him. He'd been in these situations 1,000 times. He suddenly found himself riding along the top of a wall, near a field where some kids were kicking a ball around. One of them took a wild kick, and the ball went flying straight toward the boy riding along the wall. The kids were wide-eyed, wondering if he was some kind of pro stunt cyclist. They couldn't believe anyone would actually pedal across a wall. Some of them thought he was a legend, deciding right then that bikes were way cooler than balls. Regardless, he kept rolling along the wall, taking his shortcut, until the motorcycle finally came into view. The motorcyclist admitted the guy had spooked him for a second, but he quickly realized that was as far as it would go. It's just plain absurd. But the motorcyclist was even more freaked out when he saw the bike go airborne. After launching off the wall, the cyclist was well and truly flying through the air. He soared right past some kids, who were just hanging out, eating ice cream. They were absolutely blown away to see a guy flying on a bike. The motorcyclists were caught between being totally impressed and scared out of their wits. The kids watching found the whole thing unreal. It was wild to see someone riding with that much guts. Even though the cyclist hurled his bike at the motorcycle to stop the criminals, the kids were still mesmerized, watching the bike take flight. The cyclist got back on his feet and landed on some crates right next to the bikers. He just stared down the criminals. They tried to bolt, but ditched the bag behind, desperate to avoid getting chased again. A short while later, Shelley pulled up in a white car and asked how he was holding up, even though he seemed to have a nasty cut on his head or forehead. It was tough to tell for sure, since his helmet was covering it. Shelley wanted to rush him to the hospital, but he just handed her the bag, adjusted his busted bike, and started lugging it along. Because the bike was in such rough shape, he couldn't ride it anymore. Still, Shelley pushed, worried sick that he was seriously hurt. Seeing there was no point, she finally just thanked him for getting the bag back. Jay pulled out his phone and made a call to let them know he wasn't going to make it on time because he'd been in an accident. Yuna was worried sick and asked if he was okay and if there was anything she could do to help him out. Tom Kong, curious, asked what happened. Yuna explained that Jay had gotten into a bike crash and wouldn't be able to join the meeting. The news caught Mia's attention, and she asked if Jay was doing all right. Yuna said that judging by his voice, he didn't sound severely injured, but he hadn't given much detail. Someone then chimed in that maybe Jay just didn't want to show up and made up an excuse. Yuna fired back that Jay isn't the type to dodge his responsibilities. They agreed they would all stick around a bit longer before heading out. Mia was clearly bummed and mentioned she was heading to the restroom. Once inside, she looked in the mirror and thought that everything felt a bit hollow, even though she was still hoping Jay was okay. When she stepped out, she was approached by a guy who introduced himself as Seiji Kim and said he worked for SZ magazine. He'd been watching her and thought she was exactly the kind of model he was hunting for. If she was interested, she should get in touch. After that, he handed her a card and added that she could call him whenever she needed anything. Mia was caught off guard and stared at the card in shock. Mia, Yuna, and Dom Kong said their goodbyes to the rest of the crew, promising to catch up at school. On the way, the friends talked about what a bummer it was that Jay didn't show, especially since Mia had gone to so much trouble. Mia looked stunning, and Yuna tried to cheer her up, saying there would definitely be another chance. Yuna also wanted to know who that guy was that Mia had been talking to outside the bathroom. Showing her the card, Mia explained who he was. Checking out the card, Yuna remarked that the fashion magazine was huge, so the guy definitely had legit intentions. Meanwhile, Minu was at Jay's place watching a music show while his cat played with a ball on the floor, clutching a pillow. Minu was thinking about how incredibly boring it was to be stuck at home alone. At that same moment, Jay was walking while lugging his bike to get it fixed. As he stepped into a specialty shop, he politely apologized. Standing there was a girl wearing a military cap and sporting tattoos. The girl was friendly, and dressed in a white tank top, she welcomed him. Jay explained he was there to get his bike repaired. She remembered him from the day of the race and asked if he recognized her, since she had seen the footage of the race. However, she noticed he had absolutely no clue what she was talking about. It seemed Jay had a real knack for forgetting people and things. Jay was just there to fix the bike, but she insisted on giving him some first aid because he had a small cut on his forehead. He wasn't thrilled, honestly, because he just wanted her to fix his bike as fast as humanly possible. Ignoring the girl entirely, Jay brushed off her concern for him. He knew he was her customer, but he insisted that the bike had to be the priority, even as she patched up his injury while eyeing the wreckage. He realized the damage was severe. The front fork and wheel were completely busted beyond repair. At least the frame was still in one piece, a huge relief considering Jay had trashed the bike while chasing down those thieves. Even though the girl was stunning, her tank top accentuating her tattoos. Jay wasn't focused on her at all. His gaze was locked on the photo of his uncle hanging on the wall. That picture flooded his mind with old memories, specifically the final stage of the Tour de France, reaching its climax. Jay vividly recalled watching that legendary race on his computer, where for the first time ever, a Korean cyclist was in the lead. Then the English athlete surged from behind, pushing forward to overtake him. In a heartbeat, they were sprinting toward the finish line, and Jay remembered his uncle's words, telling him that if he had a dream, he needed to chase it with everything he had. Back then, Jay had claimed he wanted to be a doctor, but his uncle insisted that the dream had to be his own, not something his parents pushed on him. The boy had shot back, arguing that he couldn't be anything more than just a student, and that all he could do was study to keep his parents happy. His uncle had countered, telling him that studying wasn't a real dream. It was far too boring to be his only goal in life. School mattered, but finding something you were truly passionate about and actually living was even better. Those words lit a fire in Jay to find something he could genuinely love. So with a grin, he asked his uncle what his dream was. His uncle replied that his dream was to reach the absolute pinnacle of the cycling world. He admitted it might have seemed impossible, but he wanted it so badly, and believed that with enough grit and dedication, nothing was out of reach. On that very day, Jay's uncle became the first Korean cyclist in history to win that final stage. Jay was lost in the memory of watching the race when his parents walked in, asking if he still had his computer running, reminding him that he had homework and needed to get to bed. Jay remembered, shutting down the PC with a peaceful mind, convinced that his uncle had done it, that nothing in this world was impossible. The childhood memories faded as Harry asked Jay if he even knew who the cyclist was, noting that he wasn't exactly famous in Korea. But in Korea, cycling was taken seriously, and Jay's uncle was a national hero, having taken first place in numerous Asian competitions. Harry mentioned that he had also conquered the final stage of the Tour de France, every cyclist's ultimate dream. Then Harry looked Jay in the eye and asked again if he knew him. Jay simply replied that Maranjo was his uncle. Harry had already suspected as much, because she had recognized the bike Jay used to train on the asphalt before he turned pro. She had also noticed the name on the frame, as cyclists often name their bikes, and she pointed the inscription out to Jay. The bike was named Maranjo. That was when Jay asked how. She knew his uncle. Harry explained that she admired Maranjo so much that she became the leader of an exclusive fan club created just for him. Then Harry started plotting out how to fix the bike. She knew she would have to replace the entire front end, and told Jay to come back in 2 days. Jay didn't seem thrilled about leaving his bike behind, but he agreed to return later. Harry then asked him to wait a second. She handed Jay a flyer saying he might be interested in joining the street league since they were hosting a long-distance championship. The first place winner would walk away with a prize of $100,000 and a shot at entering an international tournament. Jay shot the idea down instantly, but Harry said that if he changed his mind and wanted to enter with his friends, he could reach out. Jay firmly stated he had exams next month and couldn't possibly participate. Harry just smiled and said that was fine, but reminded him to come back for the bike and get that injury checked at the hospital. Jay headed out and started walking, reaching into his pocket for something, only to realize he had left his wallet back at home. Lost in thought, Jay just kept listening to his music, completely distracted. He realized his wallet was missing. Shelley's grandfather was overjoyed to arrive and see his favorite granddaughter there. He mentioned how much he had missed her. As Shelley rummaged through Jay's wallet, she noticed he was a student at a local school. Shelley asked her grandfather if she could enroll in the same school where Jay was studying, since she planned to stay there for a while. Minho was taken aback by Jay's appearance when he saw his bruised face, so much so that he immediately asked if Jay had been in an accident. Annoyed and keeping it brief, Jay simply replied that he'd had a crash. Minho asked how Jay managed to get hurt every single day, and where he had left his bike. Jay answered that it was at the repair shop. That was when Minho noticed that the motorcycle had sustained damage as well. Minho felt a pang of sadness realizing that Jay wouldn't be able to ride with him for a while. Frustrated, Minho knew he'd have to head to school alone the next day. Meanwhile, Jay's younger brother was sleeping soundly on the living room rug, right next to his friend Jack. The following day at school, everyone crowded around Jay to ask if he had been seriously injured in the accident. Dom Kang, who already considered himself one of Jay's friends, asked if he was feeling all right, since everyone had been worried sick about him at the cafe the day before. Dom Kang made it clear that Minho in particular was extremely worried standing right nearby. And, hearing Dom Kang spill the beans, Minho quickly clamped his hand over his mouth, cutting him off before he could say more. Yuna wanted Jay to be straight with them and explain exactly what had happened on the way to the cafe. Jay, who hated being hassled, replied that it was nothing major and that they should just drop it and get back to their studies. The teacher walked in and told everyone to settle down as he had an announcement. He demanded everyone's attention, calling for silence so they could hear what he had to say. He announced that starting today, they would have a new exchange student joining their class. He told Shelley to come on in and not be shy, as everyone was waiting for her. That's when the blonde girl, walking with total confidence, stepped into the classroom. The room went dead silent, everyone mesmerized by Shelley's unmatched beauty. The teacher explained that Shelley was from England and had transferred to their school. He mentioned that she would only be in Korea for one semester, and asked everyone to help her out and be friendly. He asked Shelley to give a quick introduction. She introduced herself as Shelley and mentioned that she loved traveling and cycling. The class went wild, acting as if an angel had just dropped into their midst. Yuna, on the other hand, was taken aback by how pathetic her classmates were acting. Yuna was still feeling unsettled by the boys' actions. Dom Kang thought the new girl was pretty, but he didn't find her nearly as attractive as Yuna. However, Yuna's actual focus wasn't interested in any of the criticism, compliments, or chatter. Instead, she pinpointed the source of all the commotion. She noticed the principal crouched down, peeking into the classroom, to make sure his granddaughter was settling in well. He realized the room was full of wolves, who all had their eyes glued to his little Shelley. The principal was interrupted by the janitor, who noticed him spying on the class. The teacher looked for the best place to seat Shelley. Exuding total confidence, Shelley declared she would find a spot to sit on her own. Avoiding her target, Shelley identified the perfect seat and walked right past him. Realizing he hadn't even noticed her, Shelley kissed him on the cheek, leaving the entire room stunned. Yuna, in turn, was shocked and saddened, while the boys were blown away that the new girl had just walked in and already kissed someone. The principal was furious at his granddaughter's behavior and felt the boy shouldn't dare kiss her back. The janitor had to step in and drag the principal away because his behavior was becoming inappropriate. The teacher also scolded this strange behavior in his classroom. Jay, caught off guard by Shelley's kiss, wiped his face and demanded to know what she was doing. Shelley explained that she hadn't had the chance to thank him back when he retrieved her bag on the street. Shelley handed him his wallet, which he'd dropped, and told him she'd kept it safe for him. Locking eyes with the boy sitting next to Jay, Shelley firmly stated she wanted that seat and asked if he would mind moving. The intimidated boy stammered that he didn't mind at all, adding that it would be rude not to offer his seat to Shelley. Luna realized right then that Jay had missed the meeting yesterday, all because of Shelley. Mia was devastated, feeling that the kiss in front of the entire class was completely unnecessary. June was checking out a racing flyer when Minu rushed past him. June wanted to know where Minu was heading in such a hurry. Minu brushed him off, saying he'd talk later because he'd just heard a new exchange student was in their class. June had something big to share with his friend, but Minu wasn't even listening. Everyone was gossiping about how that nerd had just kissed the blonde angel. Still, June wanted to talk to Minu about the racing flyer, but decided to let it go for now. He'd bring up later that Jay was apparently entering the same tournament they both loved. Minu burst into the classroom, breathless, hunting for the nerd who'd locked lips with the blonde angel. But Jay's desk was already swarmed by guys grilling him on where he'd met such a stunner and how they were connected. The girls were staring at Shelley, whispering about her hair and demanding to know how she even knew Jay. Shelley, glancing over at Jay, spotted Manu waving, calling out that he was from class 3. Shelley just replied that that was exactly what she meant, and it was a pleasure to meet him. Manu then stepped up to Jay, dropping a hand on his shoulder and telling him they needed to talk. Jay, however, shot back that Minu would have to wait because he was busy. Minu grabbed Jay's arm, insisting he stop lying and just spill what was going on, even if it took only a minute. All the while, Shelley kept her eyes on them both. Minu then demanded to know how long they'd been together and why they were getting so cozy with Shelley so fast. Jay replied without skipping a beat that he wasn't even with Shelley. Minu thought Jay was joking and pushed him to explain what really went down. Jay insisted that Shelley had just appeared out of thin air and kissed him. Minu found it bizarre that Shelley would kiss Jay for no reason and asked why Jay hadn't mentioned her before, especially since they were living together. Everyone around them started jumping to conclusions, whispering that Jay had betrayed Minu with Shelley. Minu, scrambling to save face, told everyone they'd all misunderstood. As the school paper representative, one student snapped a photo to document the whole scene. Meanwhile, a guy with orange hair strolled by and reached out to touch Shelley's blonde hair. She swatted his hand away with a sharp slap. Mia, who'd seen the whole thing, stood up, barely able to process what was unfolding. Mia was completely shaken, and the chatter from the students around her was just making it worse. Mia flashed back to her days being bullied, mostly by her own friends and classmates. She remembered one day in particular where they'd gone too far, throwing her books to the floor and crushing her glasses. Mia was shattered because those glasses were expensive, and she couldn't see a thing without them. That was when Jay walked over to Mia and asked about her prescription. When Mia told him, he mentioned they had the same one and offered her his spare pair. He handed her the extra pair he always carried because he broke his glasses so often. And that's how Mia first met Jay back in middle school. Mia knew Jay wasn't good with people and rarely showed his true feelings, but he was kinder than anyone else. That was the moment Mia started to fall for him. It was incredibly hard for Mia to open up, especially after all the harassment she'd endured since those middle school days. It had stripped away her confidence, making her deeply wary of every single social interaction. With class finally over, Jay was calmly heading out when he heard a voice he was absolutely sick of. It was Minu, clapping and waving around the flyer June had given him, the same one that called Jay a nerd and poked fun at his teeth. The flyer was for a race, and Minu made sure to highlight the massive 100 million won prize. It was a huge amount of cash, especially considering Minu was dead broke and desperately trying to talk him into it. Minu begged Jay to form a team and enter, promising they could make some serious money. Jay, keeping that cold, firm composure, told him he wasn't interested and ordered Minu to stop bugging him. But Minu wouldn't let up, claiming that if Jay joined, he might even end up on TV and become a star. Shelley was watching from a distance, keeping her eyes on Jay, while Minu tried to twist his arm. Just as Shelley was about to shout out and ask to tag along with Jay, her grandfather suddenly showed up. He demanded to know where she thought she was going. Shelley tried to explain she just wanted to hang out with a friend, but her grandfather grabbed her by the hood. He told her the friend could wait because he needed to see her first. Her grandfather questioned exactly what she was up to and insisted she come back home with him right then and there. Shelley was crushed, dying to follow Jay, but her grandfather dragged her away. Once Jay got home, he took a shower and was settling in to study when Minu popped up again with that flyer. Minu insisted that if Jay just fixed up his bike, they could tackle the race together. Jay, however, didn't want to hear another word about it. On the TV, an interview was playing featuring a representative from the cycling world. It was Sancho Choi, who was set to compete in a street league cycling festival. Jay knew Sancho Choi's reputation well. He was Korea's top cyclist and definitely the one to beat. When asked about the competition, Sancho Choi bragged that he would take the final stretch with whichever amateur team ended up winning. Meanwhile, Jay and June were fighting over the remote because Minu wouldn't stop, trying to watch the interview. They talked about Manhwa, an Asian cycling legend who passed away 2 years prior after an accident that happened right after a doping test. Sancho Choi mourned Manhwa's death, but then threw shade, saying that if Manhwa were still alive, his career would have been over anyway due to doping scandals. Hearing that, Jay remembered Manhwa's kind, gentle face and felt a sharp sting of pain at Sancho's words. Sancho continued to bash the use of performance-enhancing drugs and claimed he hoped other cyclists wouldn't head down that same dark path. Throughout all this, Minu and Jay wrestled for the remote until Jay suddenly stood up and declared that he was joining the competition. Minu was stunned, thinking he had misheard him. Late that night, in an open square, the three of them, Jae, Minu, and June met up. June asked Jae if he was actually joining the team with them. Jae confirmed it, especially after hearing Sancho Choi trash his uncle like that. He couldn't just let it slide. Minu asked Jae what had made him change his mind so out of the blue. Jae thought back to the interview and seethed with anger. But he wasn't about to tell his friends the real reason. Minu pressed him, wondering if it was for the prize money or the international stage. But for Jae, nothing mattered more than clearing his uncle's name and proving to Sancho Choi that Manjo never doped. June figured that, whatever the reason, it was just great to have Jae on their side. Now they had one big problem to solve. They still didn't have enough members to actually call themselves a team. Minu wondered if the guys from his old squad might join, even though they might end up as rivals. June told Minu to forget about them. That was the past. Now they could build their own team from scratch. Minu was put in charge of coming up with a name for the new crew. June agreed, noting they definitely needed a title. June asked what the two of them had in mind. Jae stayed quiet while Minu looked deep in thought. That was when Minu had the brilliant idea to call the team Super Cool. But June thought that sounded way too childish. Next they tossed around Super Another Team, Giant Team, maybe Tiger Team, or even Legendary Team. June felt that the conversation was going absolutely nowhere, so they decided to hash it out the following day. Jae had a hunch that the devil must be in the same crew as that helpless guy Minu. Minu was dead set on naming the team Super Cool, convinced it was a brilliant title. The next day during class, English was dragging on. Meanwhile, Minu was struggling to come up with a decent team name. He found it incredibly difficult, a challenge he had never faced before. During the break, the three of them huddled up to brainstorm, and Minu proudly showed off the draft he'd scribbled down the night before. Minu insisted there was no other choice but to go with Super Cool. Jae, losing his patience, flat out refused to accept such a ridiculous name. Minu asked what Jae had in mind, to which Jae snapped, "Anything but Super Cool." Minu was outraged, thinking it was a top-tier name and that Jae wasn't even putting in any effort. Just then, Shelly appeared behind Jae, who stayed indifferent and kept on ignoring her presence. Once she heard about the cycling team, she got excited and wanted in, thinking the whole idea was super cool. June politely told the blonde girl that the competition might be way too dangerous for her. Minu, however, welcomed her immediately, saying she could definitely join because she was beautiful and always welcome. He added that she just needed to know how to ride a bike and he would handle the rest. Annoyed, the girl shot back that she knew how to ride just fine. Mia had been a wreck ever since she saw the new girl kissing Jae. Her friend Yuna tried to cheer her up, asking why she had been so down lately. Mia tried to mask her true feelings, claiming she just wasn't feeling well. Then Dom Kong jumped into their conversation. He suggested that all she needed was a little boost of energy, adding that listening to some good hip-hop would definitely perk her up. Shelly joined the debate over the team name, prompting Minu to suggest the goddess and her servants. June noticed that his friend turned into an even bigger idiot whenever a girl was around. Hearing their chatter, Dom Kong asked why they kept hanging out without him. He looked so let down, saying he thought they were friends. Dom Kong added that after that night in the room, he thought he and Jae would never be separated, but seeing his beloved Jae surrounded by the new girl and the others, he felt even sadder. Mia stood frozen as the girl blended into the group, something Mia had always wished she could do herself. Yuna noticed her friend looking more dejected than usual. Meanwhile, Dom Kong was getting heated because he wanted in on the cycling team too. The blonde girl just stared at Minu. Now all five of them were trying to settle on a team name. Minu wanted to know why Dom Kong was always lurking around. Dom Kong replied that he was there because he was going to be part of the team too. Someone then asked if he even owned a bike. Dom Kong explained he was planning to pick up a used one from an online site. Minu told him they could talk more once he actually had the bike, since they were all from the same school. They considered naming the team after their school, but the idea was shot down. It felt a bit lame. Shelly commented that they were terrible at picking names, while her grandfather watched everything she was doing with the four boys. Minu still hadn't given up on calling the group Super Cool. Shelly's grandfather, the school principal, was annoyed that she was hanging out with boys again. But when he saw Shelley smiling, he realized it had been a long time since he'd seen her this happy. As the grandfather sipped his juice, a hummingbird fluttered right near Dom Kong. The tiny bird startled both Dom Kong and Minu, who initially thought it was just a bug. Someone suggested it might be a hummingbird, but June explained that hummingbirds don't live in Korea. June guessed it was likely a moth, since many people mistake them for birds because they look so similar. He mentioned that hummingbirds flap their wings faster than any other bird at least 90 times every single second, and that they're absolute masters of acrobatics. Minu couldn't stop thinking about that 90 flaps a second. It was mind-blowing, even while he was busy bickering with Dom Kong over his smoothie. Minu then started wondering just how fast someone could actually pedal a bike if they went 90 times per second. Probably faster than a motorcycle, right? He found himself daydreaming about pedaling with the speed of a hummingbird. Minu's random thoughts suddenly grabbed the attention of June Jae and Shelley. Dom Kong wanted to know what on earth a hummingbird had to do with the situation. Meanwhile, the flyers for the upcoming race were circulating all over the place. It caught the eyes of plenty of people. Several big shots were itching to sign up, while others, being completely clueless, actually thought they could win with some bargain bin bike called a Sinakin. The news eventually reached TJ, who found the whole thing pretty interesting. Back in the classroom, Mia and Jay were erasing the chalkboard. Mia casually asked Jay if he was really dating that exchange student. Jay didn't seem too thrilled about the question and asked Mia what she was even talking about. Mia, feeling a bit awkward, explained that it was just what everyone at school was whispering about, that they were a couple, and she was just curious. Jay shot that down immediately, asking who on earth was spreading such nonsense. Mia said she was relieved to hear that, adding that it looked like they were just a team or something similar. Jay clarified that it was actually a cycling team. Mia thought that sounded cool and fun, then asked what they called the team. Jay told her they decided on the name Hummingbird. Mia thought it was adorable. She asked if they'd come up with a logo yet, or an emblem, because she'd love to design one for them. Mia mentioned she was aiming to be a designer once she graduated, so if Jay was up for it, she could whip something up for them. Jay told her that if she wanted to give it a shot, she should go for it. Mia beamed, blushing, and said that would be awesome. Jay told her to hurry up, because he had to head out. Later on, Mia asked Jay if he could teach her how to ride once she bought a bike soon, since she was planning on getting one. Jay agreed to teach her whenever he had some spare time. The girl was absolutely thrilled with his answer. After leaving school, Jay headed straight to the bike shop to pick up the ride that he dropped off for repairs. Harry mentioned that Dom Kong was running later than expected. Just then, Dom Kong announced his arrival. His old man invited him to grab a drink, but Dom Kong brushed him off, saying he was wiped out and had to get to work soon. His dad told him he could at least pretend to be happy to see him. Otherwise, he'd be crushed. He then asked if Dom Kong was dating a bunch of girls at school. Dom Kong, being the blunt guy he is, said absolutely not. His dad sighed, saying that when he was Dom Kong's age, he wasn't so serious and actually knew how to enjoy life. One of his goons told the old man to stop pestering Dom Kong and just get back to eating. That was when Dom Kong asked his father to buy him a bike so he could get some exercise. His dad found it weird that Dom Kong suddenly wanted a bike, and asked how much bikes even cost these days. One of the men piped up that 50,000 rupees would probably get him something decent. Dom Kong's dad agreed to hand over the cash, tossing the money to his son and telling him to get himself a decent bike. Hearing the amount, Dom Kong thought his dad was joking. Where was he supposed to find a bike? That cheap? He thought it was ridiculous, and had no clue how he was going to pull this off, with only 50,000 won. Dom Kong eventually spotted a bike online for 100,000 won. He thought it was sketchy that there weren't any photos, but figured he'd take the gamble and get it for himself. One of his lackeys suggested he message the seller. Feeling a bit shy, Dom Kong thought about asking for a discount, trying to cut the price in half. Then he started worrying if it might be a scam. The goons insisted that no one would dare. Such a blatant scam, though. If the seller just bolted with the cash, they'd deal with it. However, the seller shot back a reply agreeing to the 50,000 won discount. Now Dom Kong felt like he'd really lucked out. He figured he could join the team on the other side. The seller assumed he was dealing with some middle or high school kid, given how broke the buyer seemed. At the very least, the scammer had already pocketed the cash from the idiot who just sent it. The scammer was also convinced the kid wouldn't bother reporting him to the police over something as trivial as a bike. Meanwhile, Harry, the girl at the bike shop, was thrilled that Jay decided to enter the competition with his boys. She said it was awesome and hoped they'd make some great memories together. She warned Jay to take real good care of the bike, since the chain was a total mess after all his uncle had passed it down to him. I reminded him to keep it in top shape. Harry shared that it had taken a while to track down all the individual parts, and the 7 wheels that Jay used before had been trashed. She explained that carbon wheels are much lighter than the standard ones, which would really make the bike feel effortless. However, she warned that if a carbon wheel cracked, it could be completely ruined, so Jay shouldn't ride recklessly. She stressed that just because it's carbon doesn't mean it's indestructible. Jay asked what the parts and repairs would end up costing. Harry replied that those 7 wheels were just pulled from a dusty corner, so he could keep them. As for the repairs, I could just pay her back after winning the competition. She hoped they'd take first place, especially for his uncle's sake after that whole doping scandal. Harry made it clear she knew that was the real reason Jay wanted to compete. Meanwhile, Vinny's friend told him to stop living like a complete slob. He pointed out that school was already out. It was dark, and Vinny shouldn't be sleeping the entire day away. Cracking one eye open, Vinny mumbled and asked what time it was. His friend told him it was already 8 in the evening, and since he wasn't dead, he needed to get up and do something with his life. Since Vinny hadn't shown up at school or answered his phone, his friend had come by, worried sick, only to find him passed out in bed. Vinny's friend told him he had a note from Vinny's mom, who had apparently swung by earlier that morning. She left a note and some cash. There was 10,000 won, and Vinny wondered what he could even do with that. The second he bought cigarettes or a bite to eat, it would be gone. His friend also told him the teacher warned that if Vinny skipped any more classes, he was getting expelled. Vinny was annoyed that he had to drag himself to class the next day, or face expulsion, but he felt like just giving up. When Vinny finally arrived at school, he was met with hostility by the staff member, in charge of checking students at the entrance. That guy wasn't exactly known for being nice to the students. His teaching methods were so brutal that they made the kids even less motivated to show up to school. He branded the students as rebels and declared that it was because of people like Vinny that the school had gone to hell. He made it crystal clear that if Vinny messed up one more time, he was out. Then muttering about the ridiculous color of Vinny's hair and calling him an eyesore. The staff member added that he didn't even know how Vinny managed to get into the school in the first place. He didn't think Vinny would ever graduate, and felt like the school was just wasting its time on a loser like him. He even mentioned that he'd prefer it if he just left and expel Vinny on the spot. But then Vinny's best friend stepped in, blocking the man's path. As soon as this well-respected student showed up, the vibe in the room shifted instantly. The friend didn't even blink. He just stared down the guy who was practically shaking with rage and strolled right past him, like it was nothing. He walked up to Vinny and asked if he was all right. Vinny didn't look too happy about it. Everyone knew the rule: you don't cross Vinny, and you definitely don't talk smack about him, not behind his back at least. The fallout would be brutal. He'd been acting like this since he was a kid. It was all about self-defense. Reaching the doorway, Vinny shouted that he wanted a word with that moron by the window who'd been staring. Vinny told the guy to get over here on his own 2 feet while he was still feeling generous. The kid, at the window, scrambled to apologize, stammering that it was just a total accident and he meant no harm. But Vinny wasn't having it. He grabbed a chair, looking ready to teach the kid a lesson. It didn't matter to Vinny if the guy was sorry or not. He had to be disciplined. He needed to make sure nobody else would ever dare pull a stunt like that again. Meanwhile, in another part of the building, the boys were still They were gawking at the gorgeous blonde transfer student. She was on the phone begging her dad to ship her bike over because she was dying to get back on the road. While she was happily chatting away to her father, on the call Dong Gong was having a nightmare trying to get a response to his own messages. He was desperately reaching out to the guy, the one who'd sold him the bike, but the dude had gone completely radio silent. He tried calling over and over again, but he just couldn't get a single word back. He figured the guy was ghosting his calls and texts on purpose. Yuna, who was watching him, noticed he was glued to his phone with a dead serious look on his face. Meanwhile, Mia wasn't paying much attention to Yuna, mostly because she was deep into sketching a hummingbird. Yuna asked what Mia had been drawing this whole time. Mia explained she was pouring her heart into a new design. Yuna wanted to know if it was some kind of logo, and Mia confirmed that yes, it was, specifically a hummingbird. Yuna mentioned that her brother and Jay had finished their snack in a flash and headed back out. She asked Mia if she had any clue where they'd gone. Mia said she wasn't entirely sure, but she overheard them talking about submitting an entry for a competition. Mia had no idea that her brother was trying to enter a contest, but she figured that now that they were living together, he'd start leveling up his skills. Mia was beaming, feeling like she'd finally nailed the perfect sketch. All that was left was to show the boys and see what they thought of it. Elsewhere, the boys were walking out of the post office after dropping off their contest application. Jay grumbled, asking if it was really necessary for them both to show up just to mail a form. Minu fired back that, since they were on the same team, they had to stick together. He asked if Jay would rather just lounge around at school while he did all the heavy lifting. Jay told Minu to just drop it and get a move on because he was wasting time. Minu, who was starving, said he wanted to grab a bite to eat before leaving. Jay told him he wasn't in the mood and that he'd grab something himself later. Minu thought to himself that there was no middle ground. With Jay, the guy was always such a jerk. Across the street, Minu spotted someone with a bright pink flower-covered bicycle and couldn't help but think it looked completely bizarre. The man called his bike Shinchang and asked it to wait patiently while he went to submit his application for the contest. He then slapped a lock on it, making sure no one would steal his beloved ride. After showering the bike with kisses, he promised he'd be back in a heartbeat. Just seeing that gave Minu the creeps. He figured this guy was way too eccentric. Minu and Jay walked away from the man. They needed to get back fast, as they were basically on a break from class. However, the guy didn't appreciate hearing Minu call his bike a stupid piece of junk. Minu snapped back, asking if the man was talking to him. The man said yeah, and demanded to know why Minu had insulted his bike with such a nasty name. The guy called Minu a loser and declared that he had no right to use such language for his incredible bike. Both boys thought the guy's behavior was completely off. He seemed like some kind of hardcore otaku or something. Livid, the man yelled at Minu to take back what he'd said. He was so triggered by the comment about his bike that he grabbed Minu by the collar, spitting and shouting. He kept rambling, tossing around weird terms only an otaku would know. Minu begged his friend for help, but Jay just told him to apologize and move on. Realizing his friend wasn't backing him up, Minu caved and took it back. He only said that stuff because he thought the bike looked pretty sweet. The cyclist told him not to stare like that, calling him a total loser. The guy then leaned in and grabbed his competition entry form, pointing out that their team name was Manga Team. Minu realized this otaku was actually entering the Street League too. The man added that he could call him Senekan because that was his name. Just like its owner, the bike was super exotic, and it even had a unique name. The two boys couldn't wrap their heads around how someone that strange could even exist. They pedaled hard toward school, since they were already in the middle of their break. On the way, they couldn't stop thinking about how that otaku was a total weirdo. Jay remarked that the bike was probably his girlfriend. That's exactly why Minu made him so angry. Minu looked at Jay, unable to tell if he was being serious or messing with him, because Jay never showed a hint of emotion. The guy zipped past them and called them both slow middle schoolers. As he rode away, he said he hoped they enjoyed the view of his bike's backside, calling it very charming. Minu had no clue who this guy was, or why he was so full of himself, especially while riding a regular bike to deal with his own problems. Dom Kong called his dad's henchman and explained that he'd just been scammed. This was completely unacceptable. They were a respected gang and couldn't deal with such humiliation, especially since Dom Kong himself had suggested buying it online. One of the henchmen told Dom Kong to finish his class peacefully, while he promised to take care of everything. The thugs then called another associate to explain that someone had stolen money from their young master. Using the phone number and bank account provided, he would hunt the scammer down. He told the associate to pass the intel to a hacker to track the scammer's location. The other associate confirmed that. Pinpointing the scammer would be a piece of cake for their hacker, who had recently hacked into one of the biggest credit card companies in Korea. He ordered that once they had a location, they should bring a few extra guys and some tools. Their goal was to teach the scammer a lesson. Dom Kong was deeply upset, feeling like he should have never let himself get played by an internet scam. He just hoped he could find the guy and confront him face to face. While Dom Kong was stewing over this, his face darkened when someone rested a hand on his shoulder. He spun around with such a furious expression that he startled a classmate who had only come to tell him that Yuna wanted to talk. Even though he was still fuming and wondering what Yuna wanted, seeing her always put Dom Kong in a good mood, even if Dom Kong tried to stay serious, he couldn't when he saw Yuna's eyes. So he ran off to see what she needed. As he approached, Dom Kong asked how he could help her. She wanted to know why he looked so gloomy today. Yuna handed him a piece of chewing gum to help him chill out, telling him to stop stressing and get a sugar rush to boost his mood. For Dom Kong, that chewing gum was more than amazing. It was like a gift from the goddess Yuna. Dom Kong told Yuna he felt bad because she wouldn't give him a little kiss. Annoyed by his comment, Yuna gently stroked Dom Kong's face before slapping him. Meanwhile, somewhere else, the scammer was happily riding his bike, wearing a helmet, and snacking on treats he had bought. He'd purchased them with the money swindled from some idiot who had fallen for the classic, cheap, new bike trap. Now the scammer was enjoying a feast bought with the 50,000 won sent by the gullible buyer. Back at his hideout, the scammer was thrilled with his haul. He was planning to sneak off, hoping to fly under the radar and dodge the landlord for the rent. The scammer thought he was in the clear. He figured he'd just skip out on the payment, but something felt wrong. When he got back home, he saw his door had been kicked in. His place was swarming with people. Panicked that he'd been robbed, the scammer rushed inside. But the moment he stepped in, he was met by a group of men in sharp black suits clutching all sorts of tools. And let's just say they definitely didn't look like they were there to hang out. After all, the guy was just a broke college student who delivered food on his bike. He had no clue why they were greeting him with such terrifying intensity. Trembling, he dropped his delivery bag to the floor and stammered, asking who on earth they were and what they wanted. Night had already fallen by the time he got home and stumbled into this nightmare. They all started grilling him, demanding to know why he dared to scam their young master. Right then, the guy was pinned to a chair, completely unable to move or speak, still wearing his cycling helmet. One of the goons working for Dom Kang's father was fuming, snapping at the scammer for picking the wrong person to mess with. They made it crystal clear if he wanted to play the con man, he'd better be ready to face the music. The bodyguard was clearly annoyed, huffing about, having to waste his time dragging himself to such a dump. He warned the scammer that even tied up as he was, he'd be front row for the young master's arrival, and that the price for his mistake would be steep. He'd basically bought himself a one-way ticket to trouble. All for the sake of that measly 50,000 won scam. While the goons surrounded the shivering guy, their young master, Dom Kang, finally strolled in, and everyone bowed with absolute respect. Dom Kang looked livid. He'd spent his entire day hunting down the guy, who had actually pulled the wool over his eyes. The scammer, still strapped to the chair, stared at the kid, thinking he looked like a mere high schooler. He couldn't wrap his head around why these tough guys were blindly obeying him. He started shaking even harder. Dom Kang reached into his pockets, pacing around as if he were looking for something. But actually he was just retrieving a precious treasure, something that had kept him going on a day that had been incredibly rough. The scammer sat there, tears streaming down his face, waiting for the worst to come out of those pockets. He was completely thrown off by Dom Kang's sudden shift, because out came nothing but a caramel candy, leaving the previously stone-faced young master looking surprisingly satisfied. The scammer was so bewildered, he actually stopped crying. One of the men asked what they should do with the guy, but Dom Kang just kept on chewing, because that candy Yuna gave him tasted absolutely amazing. Switching back to his cold, serious vibe, Dom Kang stared at the guy and demanded to know where the bike was, the one he'd sold him. A goon pointed to it, and Dom Kang saw it was basically brand new. Walking over to the bike, he started talking to it, saying he didn't know the whole story. But he was thrilled because it was in perfect shape and it had only set him back 50,000 won. At that point, the real owner of the bike, if he hadn't been hogtied and gagged, definitely would have had something to say. The poor guy's heart was breaking, watching someone else handle his beloved bike like it was nothing. The bodyguard figured something good must have happened earlier, because Dom Kang was in such a strangely good mood. Dom Kang, feeling like he'd gotten the deal of a lifetime, told the scammer that since he said he was hanging up his bike for good, he wouldn't be needing the helmet either. Happy with his new ride and gear, Dom Kang told him he was free to go. The bodyguard looked a bit disappointed in his young boss's leniency. Meanwhile, the scammer was bawling no longer from fear, but from the sheer heartbreak of losing his bike. The lead goon told him he'd gotten off incredibly lucky. Then he ordered his men to untie him. A little later, the guy was discovered in a vacant lot, stuck upright in the dirt. And he wasn't alone. A few stray cats were circling him, looking like they wanted to play. Back at Jay's place, Minu wanted to hop on the computer for a bit, but Jay shut him down because he had an online class to attend. Just then, Minu heard some strange noises coming from the window. Asked if Jay had heard that noise outside too. Stuffed up with a nasty cold, Jay mumbled that it was probably just a stray cat, or something along those lines, not buying that answer. Minu cracked the window open to get a look. He spotted Dom Kong out there. Minu was clearly obsessed with his shiny new bike, showing it off like it was a prized trophy. Was just as hyped about his buddy's latest score. Naturally, since he's into bikes, Jay's interest was piqued, and he rushed over to the window to see what the commotion was about. A few minutes later, all three of them were hanging out in front of Jay's place checking out the bike. Minu took the chance to give it a test ride, but as Minu pedaled along, he had this nagging feeling he'd seen this bike somewhere in the neighborhood before, though he couldn't quite put his finger on where. Glancing over at Dom Kong, Minu asked if the bike set him back a lot and what he actually paid for it, feeling pretty smug. Dom Kong bragged that he'd snagged it for only 50,000 on a used goods site. Seeing the look on Minu and Jay's faces, they clearly weren't buying that steal of a deal. Dom Kong asked if he'd overpaid. Minu and Jay scanned the bike again, realizing it was in mint condition. They turned to Dom Kong and asked what kind of deal he made with the owner to get it for such a low price. Dom Kong just repeated the excuse the seller gave him, that the guy just wasn't going to ride it anymore, so he let it go for cheap. Jay was about to leave Minu and Dom Kong to themselves and head back inside to hit the books, since his grades had really taken a hit lately. Now that he had a set of wheels, Dom Kong, who had no clue how to ride, asked his friends for some pointers. Minu suggested Dom Kong try learning how to skid, since that makes handling a fixed-gear bike a whole lot easier. But judging by the blank look on Dom Kong's face, Minu figured his friend had never even heard of skidding before. Getting fired up, Minu tried to explain that skidding was a pro move for fixed-gear bikes, where you lock the rear wheel by using the raw power of your legs. Realizing his explanation wasn't clicking, Minu decided to show him, telling Dom Kong to just watch and copy what he did. In a flash, Minu pulled off the move so Dom Kong could get the idea. Feeling cocky, Dom Kong thought he had it down just by watching, and decided to give it a shot. Right off the bat, Dom Kong couldn't get his footing right. A buddy pointed out that his form was all wrong. Still, Dom Kong kept at it, determined to find a way to nail the move. After struggling for a few minutes just to get his foot in place to even start pedaling, Dom Kong took off looking completely uncoordinated. After just a few rotations, Dom Kong was already gassed. Then, Dom Kong had the genius idea to bomb down a hill on a bike with no brakes. Minu yelled at Dom Kong to try skidding like he showed him earlier. Dom Kong realized he was losing control of the bike fast. He couldn't let that happen, so he tried to pedal backward to fight the momentum. He screamed that it wasn't working at all. To Dom Kong, the pedals were spinning way too fast for him to stop. Dom Kong bailed, shouting that he couldn't stop the bike. His legs were just flailing on the pedals. After the crash, Minu realized his friend was definitely not cut out for sports. Minu decided it would be safer if they all headed to a shop the next day to get their friends some actual brakes installed. Another school day dawned at Sunny High, where students were bracing themselves for another grueling study session. The girls were huddled together, whining about how they looked, and frantically trying to apply makeup to cover up every little flaw. Meanwhile, some of the other students were living a wilder life, spending their time skating around the campus. A group of girls was chatting openly, admitting they were just waiting for the day Minu would finally notice their feelings. Just then, a skater zoomed past them at full speed, and the sudden gust of wind lifted their skirts. The guy felt pretty pleased with himself after catching a glimpse of 2 pairs of underwear, one pink and one white. However, that group of 3 girls was far from amused. In fact, those antics just made them even more furious. Realizing the wind lifting their skirts wasn't just some random accident, they saw the orange-haired guy had intentionally tried to sneak a peek down at the girls' undergarments. It gave him such a thrill noticing that most of the girls were wearing white. It seemed like a trend too. The blonde exchange student. She really fit in with the group, mingling and acting as friendly as she possibly could. It sparked massive interest. For the orange-haired guy, it was all about the blonde girl pulling off those radical skateboard tricks. He looked unusually hyped. The orange-haired skater adjusted his hair. It was his signature move. Always the center of attention and bursting with confidence, he decided it was high time to make his move. He was ready to approach the girl who brought him so much joy. But unfortunately, he couldn't. A group of girls cornered him, clearly not thrilled about his stunts. They were even more annoyed once they realized those skateboard tricks causing the wind to lift their skirts weren't exactly accidental. One of the girls decided to give him a taste of her anger with a few sharp jabs to the stomach. The others happily joined in, stomping on the guy just to make him feel the love. Meanwhile, the rest of the group was huddled around Minu, admiring the logo Mia had designed. Mia had been tasked with creating it to impress Jay. Lifting her notebook, Mia showed it off to everyone, asking for their take. Minu, being the total gentleman, gently took Mia's hands, and he declared that the logo looked absolutely stunning. He claimed that from now on, the team was destined to win because of it. Yuna, knowing her brother all too well, told Minu to cut it out. It was just an excuse to hold Mia's hand. Minu was rattled, because the way Yuna put it made him sound like a total creep. Shelly leaned in to get a better look at Mia's logo, saying she drew really well and asked to see it up close. Mia, still fuming at Shelly for kissing Jay, refused to let her get a closer look at the design. Noticing Mia's cold shoulder and refusal to cooperate, Shelly snapped and asked what exactly her problem was. The tension in the air became so thick that even Minu, who was usually oblivious and rarely picked up on anything, finally realized that the girls were at each other's throats. Still, Minu was absolutely thrilled because they finally had the perfect logo for the crew. The vibe shifted a bit after that. Minu asked Jay if he liked the logo too, since Jay hadn't reacted at all. In a cold, flat tone, without even glancing at the drawing, Jay just said, "Yeah." Mia felt satisfied and beamed at Jay, telling him she was so happy he liked it since she had designed it specifically for him. From a distance, Yuna watched Dom Kang stumble in. Looking completely disoriented, she couldn't figure out what kind of trouble he'd gotten himself into this time. Dom Kang was struggling to walk, practically dragging himself along the classroom furniture, just to get to his seat. Everyone noticed how much pain he was in, wondering if he'd been in a fight, or if someone had beaten him up. Trying to act upbeat despite looking totally drained, Dom Kang explained that last night he'd been practicing drifting until late. Now Dom was dead set on buying training wheels. After school, because he was terrified of riding his bike without them, it felt way too dangerous. Minu, being all concerned about bike safety, asked Dom where he'd left it, and if he'd even remembered to lock it up. Dom, aching but grinning, told Minu not to sweat it, swearing his bike would never get stolen outside the school. Outside in the hallway, Dom's bike was chained to a massive Rottweiler, which was drawing a ton of attention from passers-by. Everyone was checking out the bike, impressed by how the styling and the color scheme matched so perfectly. But every time someone tried to get a closer look, they were met with that giant Rottweiler, ready to defend it. Just seeing the dog kept people back, and everyone was wondering who on earth thought it was a good idea to use a Rottweiler as a bike lock. The classroom was in an uproar, and Dom Kang was the ringleader, having tied his Rottweiler right there in the middle of it. He was just protecting his bike. His antics completely threw Jay off, even though they knew each other. Jay just couldn't wrap his head around him. Even on the days when Dom Kang didn't show any reaction at all, Jay couldn't hide his discomfort in such bizarre situations. Mia, meanwhile, didn't care about the bike or the dog. She asked Jay if he was free this weekend to teach her how to ride. Her friend, Yuna, made sure Jay couldn't back out, reminding him that Mia had worked her tail off on the team logo. So as a favor, Jay really had to teach her how to ride this weekend. With a shrug, Jay simply gave his word. Mia was over the moon, but then the blonde exchange student, Shelley, cut in telling Mia to back off because she couldn't just claim Jay for herself. Mia wanted to know what her problem was, telling her that she didn't speak for Jay. Shelley didn't care. She already had plans for the weekend and wanted to hang out too. Dom Kang chimed in super hyped, saying he joined because he needed the practice. Min Woo, not wanting to leave Jay alone with the girls, insisted that he'd be training with him all weekend long. Yuna just looked on, thinking the boys were such idiots. They didn't even realize Mia was just using this as an excuse to get some one-on-one time with Jay. Min Woo glanced at June, thinking about inviting him, but he figured June was probably swamped, cramming for his college entrance exams. But in reality, June was glued to his phone, scouting out his competition. In the world of competitive sports, staying ahead isn't just about raw talent. It's about knowing exactly what your rivals are up to. June spotted a rider who was really turning heads on a 5-speed bike. This guy was currently training in their city, gearing up for the same championship that June's team was entering. The guy was hitting speeds between 89 kilometers per hour and 92 kilometers per hour. And during his high-intensity training, he'd occasionally push past 97 kilometers per hour, especially on those downhill stretches. He even had a car following him, filming every single move. He was live streaming his training sessions for everyone to see just how good he was. In his latest session, he clocked in at a wild 102 kilometers per hour. That scared the life out of June, because he had never heard of anyone hitting speeds like that. Over at the bike shop, Dom Kang decided it was time to stop tempting fate with his bike, so he brought it in to get some brakes installed. Harry finished up the maintenance and added front brakes to make it a lot safer. Dom Kang was stoked, finally feeling like he could ride with some actual confidence. Jay was the one who told Dom Kang about the shop, but he hadn't realized that the girl from the web stream was the manager. Min Woo asked the gorgeous mechanic if she was the same girl who ran the stream and managed the shop. She explained that the live streams were just a hobby, and her real job was keeping the shop her father owned running smoothly. Harry then started grilling them about the upcoming competition and why they weren't out there putting in the work. Min Woo, fully confident in his friend's skills, bragged that with Jay on their team, victory was in the bag. But June cut him off right there, after having scoped out the other contestants and checked the rankings. He warned them that if they didn't take this seriously, they wouldn't even make it past the preliminaries. The mood got pretty awkward. Min Woo asked if June was always hanging around here. June quickly replied that he was, and that today he just popped in for a routine tune-up and to swap out a tire. Dom Kang was just happy to see all his friends in one place. He thought it was basically their little clubhouse. He told us he was worried about June spending so much time digging into other competitors, especially with the entrance exams right around the corner. Still, June wanted to show them what she'd found regarding the other participants and their abilities. When June played a video of a cyclist easily hitting speeds over 100 kilometers per hour, they were all completely floored. Seriously, they couldn't believe a cyclist could even reach those kinds of speeds. Harry, the shop manager, and a total pro in the field, explained that hitting that speed on a 5.1 gear ratio was mostly thanks to drafting behind a car acting as a windbreak. Under those conditions, any elite cyclist could hit 100 kilometers per hour. She also mentioned that the new Guinness World Record for cycling speed was over 200 kilometers per hour. Minu remarked that there seemed to be no limit to human potential. He then asked June who this guy was. After some digging, June reported that he was known as Monster 13. Turns out he was a famous high school football player, a quarterback who wore number 13. He used to lead his team and was nicknamed the Football Beast for his ability to carry the squad, practically by himself. But one day he got injured in a game and couldn't run like he used to. Because of that constant nagging knee pain, he quit football, and after letting go of his dream to play in the States, he headed back to Korea. He started cycling every day just to rehab his knee. To him, that endless pedaling was basically intense physical therapy. His passion for biking turned him into an absolute beast on wheels. Now he'd formed the Monster team to enter the race. He was already considered one of the top favorites to win. June explained that street cyclists and competitive racers use completely different muscle groups and have different body types. She noted that even though these athletes have bodies built for track cycling, allowing them to handle a 5.1 gear with ease, it was insane to think he could beat someone like Monster 13 just by hanging out with friends. Minu, clearly bummed out, said there was no way to even compete if a guy like that was in the race. Dom Kong couldn't really add much since he'd just bought his bike. Seeing them so discouraged by being physically outclassed, Harry suggested they try using training rollers. She invited them to follow her so she could show them the space and explain how the rollers worked. When Harry led them into the room reserved for roller and bike training, they were blown away. "I've never seen anything this professional." She explained that this is where the team members come to train from time to time. The rollers are perfect for practicing pedal technique and testing real-world conditions. She mentioned that training here would help them easily find the best posture and style for each rider. Dom Kong, despite being a total newbie, found it fascinating and wanted to be the first to try it out. However, as soon as he positioned his bike on the rollers to start, he immediately struggled. That alone was enough to frustrate him. When Dom Kong finally managed to start pedaling, it was obvious how much effort he was putting in even for basic movements. He was wobbling side to side, and the annoying noise he was making showed he couldn't control the bike at all. He never imagined that riding on rollers would be this complicated, not to mention the sheer strength it required. At one point, Dom Kong asked why it was so tough, all while his bike was shaking violently from side to side. The shop manager kindly explained that he was shaking because he was putting way too much tension on the handlebars and his shoulders. She told him to keep them loose and relaxed, and it would be much easier to control. Even with her advice, he still found it incredibly hard, even though it looked so simple when she explained it. It definitely wasn't that easy in practice. As Dom Kong kept grumbling, he noticed that right next to him, Jay had already set his bike up on the rollers, and he was pedaling like he'd been doing it his whole life. Dom Kang asked Jay how on earth he was so gifted at this. Jay explained that his secret came from endless practice when he was just a kid riding alongside his uncle. Minu chimed in too, pointing out that Jay just seemed to be a natural at everything he touched. He honestly found it incredibly unfair. John grinned, adding that Jay was just built different, which is exactly why he's the ace of the squad. The mechanic watched closely, noting how Jay's upper body stayed rock solid, while his pedaling was buttery smooth. The guy was in peak condition. Sure, anyone can push pedals, but to actually engage every muscle and do it as naturally as Jay was showing them, that takes serious dedication. Harry watched Jay and realized he was truly the nephew of the legendary Manhwa, carrying that raw cycling talent in his blood. The pretty mechanic then let them know she had to go help another customer, but she hyped them up to keep grinding on the bikes whenever they got the chance. Once they felt confident enough to handle the pedals, it would be time to take it to the streets. After giving it 100 tries, Dom Kang was totally gassed and frustrated, honestly. It was way harder than any of them had signed up for. Minu was spent, too drenched in sweat. Even though he hadn't struggled quite as much as Dom Kong, he was still wearing out fast. Watching how easily Jay moved, Minu had assumed it was just a matter of sitting down and pushing the pedals. But he realized, right then and there, that there was a whole lot more to it. He didn't even know how to pull off a skid yet, and had so much left to master even though he was absolutely wiped. Dom Kang was already thinking about getting back on the bike the next day, dead set on impressing Yuna. Minu asked what on earth Dom Kang saw on his sister, since Minu didn't get the hype at all, and thought she looked like a homely cow. Dom Kang didn't take that disrespect lightly, doubling down and insisting his girl looked nothing like some barnyard animal. Minu just couldn't wrap his head around why this weirdo was the only one obsessed with her. It genuinely baffled him. That news hit Dom Kang like a freight train. He had never once imagined that his crush could be Minu's sister. Minu found his reaction bizarre, especially since they were identical twins, and Dom Kang hadn't noticed until this very moment. But Dom Kang just got super fired up and straight up refused to believe it. There had to be another explanation. How could they be brother and sister when they didn't even look alike? I mean, maybe a slight resemblance, but barely. Minu asked if Dom Kang really hadn't suspected any, connection between him and Yuna until now. Suddenly, Dom Kang started acting totally unhinged. He jumped right in front of Minu, startling him, and Minu demanded to know what his deal was out of nowhere. Dom Kang stood there staring at Minu, calling him brother. Minu felt awkward and annoyed by his friend's weird vibes. The whole thing was so strange that even the other two guys stopped pedaling to watch. Jay, who never lost focus, even quit pedaling just to see what was going down. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Mia had just stepped out of the shower, drying her hair and feeling pretty good while checking out her bike. She remembered that Jay promised to teach her how to ride. She saw it as the perfect chance for them to get closer, and she hoped she'd be able to ride properly by the next day. She really wanted to make him proud. The day Mia had been counting down to finally arrived. She was at the park where Jay was, going to finally teach her how to ride. Mia and Shelly were sitting on a bench, looking like they were waiting for someone. Dom Kang walked up to them, carrying a bag of yogurts, trying to be the nice guy. He offered them their pick of flavors. One grabbed strawberry and the other wanted the original. Shelly, being her usual rebellious self, just gave the lid a glance and tossed it in the trash without even licking it. That actually annoyed Dom Kang, who would have killed to lick the lid himself. He muttered that she shouldn't have just tossed it without licking it off first, asking her if she didn't know the basic yogurt etiquette. Shelly ignored him, completely refusing, point blank, to lick the lid. Dom Kang, however, licked his own yogurt lid with total enthusiasm. He explained that before you toss the yogurt lid, you have to lick it clean like this. I found that absolutely gross. Dom Kang licked that lid so thoroughly it was practically sparkling, which only made it more nauseating. Flustered by his reaction, he snapped back that that's just how everyone eats yogurt. Mia tried to smooth things over, claiming she eats it the exact same way. Just then, Yuna showed up with the boys. She noticed people were already hanging out with Mia. As usual, her brother breezed past her, ruffling her hair. He knew how much it bugged her. Jay, being the total gentleman, didn't even register it. Yuna, for her part, wasn't paying any attention to Jay either. Minu, playing the Joker as always, rolled up with a wisecrack. With the girls waiting, Dom Kang and Mia both stood up. She waved, hoping Jay would notice her. Shelly wanted to catch his eye too, but she stayed put. Dom Kang, ever the gentleman and a huge show-off, rose bowed and greeted the newcomers. He couldn't wait to show Yuna his brand new cycling skills. He bragged that he'd spent the entire night training just to show her everything he'd learned. But the young woman just told him to stop trying so hard to look cool, even though he claimed to have practiced. His odds of impressing her were zero. Dom Kang desperately needed to win her over, by any means necessary. So he decided to pull off a stunt to score some points with her. At first, everything was going smoothly. He was giving it everything he had to appear, like a master of the bike. He showed off his unique drifting technique, though he'd basically just mastered a new way to get hurt. Lacking both luck and actual skill, he completely botched the long drift. His total lack of ability caused a minor wipeout, which he felt directly in his lower regions after a wave of sharp pain. Dom Kang couldn't take it. He scrambled off the bike and curled up on the ground like a crying toddler. Writhe in pain, that is. Yuna noted that his training really paid off, since now he could put on amateur bike comedy shows. Walking over to him, she told him he shouldn't try so hard. To make her laugh, that he should just be himself. Completely unbothered by the chaos, Mia stayed hyper-focused on Jay. She stepped toward him and asked if her bike seat was too high. With a serious look, Jay explained that if the seat is too low, pedaling becomes a nightmare and it's terrible for your joints. Mia nodded, in agreement, promising to get used to the setup he suggested. Trying to play it nice, Mia reminded Jay to hold the seat behind her just so she wouldn't fall. Not wanting to get too close, he promised he was holding the seat steady and that they could give it a go. Minu stood nearby enjoying the circus and suggested to Shelly that they do something else. The blonde said no, though she was clearly annoyed. Shelly decided to stick around. Mia's insecurity was off the charts. She kept begging Jay not to let go. He told her to quit freaking out and just start pedaling, pointing out that he was doing all the heavy lifting, while she wasn't putting in any effort at all. He warned her that locking up her shoulders would ruin her balance, advising her to keep her upper body loose and relaxed. Mia honestly had no clue how to ride. She was wobbling all over the place, pedaling in this bizarre, jerky way. and every single time she lost her footing, she'd throw herself onto Jay. He asked her over and over to center her weight and stop tensing up, complaining that her stiffness made his job so much harder and honestly embarrassing. But desperate for his attention, she agreed to try again. With every passing second, Shelley grew more and more irritated. Jay wasn't giving her the time of day. Finally, she muttered that she couldn't take it anymore. Minu watched Shelley storm over toward Mia to tell her to stop flirting with Jay. Even though Minu was staring straight ahead, his mind drifted back to his childhood. He was thinking about the days he spent biking with his sisters, especially when he was teaching his youngest sister how to ride a bike. He remembered Yuna teasing him, saying their dad was the one who bought them the bikes, specifically so they could keep them. Despite the jokes, he truly loved biking with them. He recalls the day a skilled rider zoomed past them, acting like they weren't even there. His little sister was totally amazed by the rider's moves. That quick moment really pushed Minu to train hard and eventually match that stranger's skills. His younger sister excitedly suggested he chase the guy down. Minu told his sisters to hold on tight while he pedaled with everything he had. Those precious memories left Minu feeling calm and peaceful. Back in the present, Shelley walked up to Jay and asked if he could teach her how to ride, claiming she had forgotten how. Trying to avoid the drama, Jay straight up pointed out that he'd already heard her bragging about her amazing skills in cycling. Upset, Mia snapped at Shelley, telling her to stop flirting with Jay so he could get back to the lesson. Not backing down, Shelley asked if Mia was actually there to learn how to ride, or just to spend the whole day all over him. Offended, Mia demanded to know when she had ever been all over Jay. She insisted she'd barely even touched him, denied any inappropriate contact, and ordered Shelley to stop making things up. Seeing his friend's embarrassment, Minu stepped in to cool things down. He suggested they swap partners. Minu would teach Mia, while Jay took a break with Shelley. Jay sighed with relief that his buddy saved him, having totally lost track of all the girls. Bickering. Enjoying having Jay to herself, Shelley put her sunglasses on his face to see how she looked. She then grabbed his glasses, tried them on, and asked for his opinion. She couldn't wear them for long, though, as the strong prescription made her dizzy. Not amused by her games, Jay handed her sunglasses back and demanded his own pair. Shelley stubbornly refused, declaring that she wasn't giving them back. Watching from afar, Mia felt a deep wave of disappointment. It looked like Jay was having way more fun with Shelley than he ever did with her. Noticing her sudden mood shift, Minu asked if she wasn't happy with her new instructor. The saddened girl shyly replied that it wasn't about him. However, Minu's sister, Yuna, was standing right behind them and didn't like where the conversation was heading. Annoyed, Yuna asked why her brother was teaching Mia instead of Jay. Minu explained that Jay was exhausted and they had switched places. Gritting her teeth, Yuna sternly warned her brother not to try anything funny with her friend. Before Minu could answer, Dom Kong suddenly showed up. "Hey boss, Minu." Dom Kong eagerly declared that he would take care of Yuna so Minu could go have some fun. Minu told Dom to stop calling him that, finding it super weird. Dom ignored him, his only priority being Minu's sister. He then told Minu to go have fun with Mia. Upset, Yuna told Dom that it was weird and creepy, insisting he shouldn't call her brother boss, acting all affectionate. Dom explained he called Minu boss because he already felt like part of the family. Yuna, showing her own brand of affection, lightly grabbed Dom's neck, preparing to smack him in the face with a playful punch. Meanwhile, Mia had to settle for her new cycling coach. At one point, Mia realized she wasn't good at biking, which brought her to tears. Minu tried to explain kindly that cycling isn't about talent, but about effort. He explained that her fear of falling was holding her back. Head down and quiet Mia seemed to agree with her new teacher. Minu went on repeating that it wasn't about talent. The real issue was her shyness. If she stayed this scared, she would never improve, which could stop her from ever becoming a cyclist. Mia looked down, remembering how her classmates used to bully her at school. She was constantly teased by her classmates, who would play inappropriate pranks on her. Mia always kept everything bottled up, never daring to voice her frustration, just to keep the peace with her friends. Deep down, those old memories only made her feel even more hollow and sad. Minu stepped in, urging her to keep pushing forward and not give up. He warned her that if she backed down now, fear would only sink its claws in deeper later on. Resting a steady hand on her helmet, Minu told her not to be afraid of taking a spill. Whatever she was doing, she needed to trust herself. Everything feels terrifying the first time you try it, but once you nail it, it's not such a big deal anymore. His words hit home, and suddenly, Mia wanted the courage to keep going. She was dead set on not letting the fear of falling stop her. She wanted to be a cyclist and ride right alongside Jay, and Minu was genuinely stoked to see that fire back in her eyes. He wasn't about to quit on her, holding the bike steady, while Mia desperately tried to find her center of gravity. Minu was there like a rock, keeping her grounded. With every encouraging word, Minu kept telling her she was inches away from greatness. If she just pushed a little harder, she was going to crush it. Minu told her to stop staring at the ground, keep her eyes on the path ahead, and pedal with total confidence. With the noise in her head fading away and her focus locked on the goal, Mia started making real progress, even with that lingering fear. Knowing Minu had her back gave her so much peace of mind. Satisfied, Minu thought she'd finally clicked, but he told her to keep those pedals moving. Mia agreed to keep at it. She asked Minu to hold the bike for a bit longer, but just as she spoke those words and glanced back, she realized she was riding solo. Minu was already a few paces away, cheering her on. Her hard work finally paid off, drawing cheers from everyone, and Mia was beaming, because she knew she'd actually done it. Dom Kong noticed Mia was handling it all on her own, while Shelley, dripping with jealousy, couldn't see what the big deal was. To her, riding a bike was no-brainer, and her look of pure disdain said it all. The cold, sharp look Jay shot Shelley was enough to shut her down. He didn't even have to say a word. Meanwhile, Minu was feeling pretty proud of the masterclass he'd just delivered. Mia was thriving because he was such a killer teacher, and she seemed to finally get it. She was pedaling on her own, no hands required, and Mia was absolutely thrilled with herself. This was a win she'd earned, and as she rolled back to the group, Minu told her, "See, you've got it now." He added that it wasn't as impossible as she thought, and now that she could ride, they were ready for the road. They could finally hit the trails together, and Mia was so grateful for Minu's recognition and his endless patience. He really had been the best coach she could ask for. Jay looked over once more. Minu was having a blast, but Jay shut it down with a single icy stare. With a look of pure annoyance, Jay muttered that he was feeling off and just walked away. Minu was completely blindsided by Jay's sudden attitude shift. The vibe died instantly, and Jay's exit basically triggered a chain reaction that sent the whole group scattering. Everyone started heading in different directions, even though Minu really wanted them to stick together and just ride. Mia felt a pang of sadness. She'd finally learned to ride just in time for Jay to bail. Luna sighed, saying it was a shame, but since the group was breaking up, she figured she'd head out too. Mia, still riding high on her progress, said it had been fun, but she had to get going as well. Yuna looked over and noticed Dom Kong was standing there in silence. She asked if he wasn't leaving, and he offered to walk her home, but Yuna thanked him and insisted she'd just grab a taxi. Dom wouldn't take no for an answer, and kept trailing her until she found one. Yuna walked on ahead. Dom followed close behind, keeping a watchful eye, until he was totally drained, so he asked Yuna to guard the bikes for a second. He told her he was going to hit a convenience store for a drink, and asked if she wanted anything. All she wanted was for him to quit following her. It was getting really annoying. Just then, some guys wandered by, bummed about missing out on the action. One of them just wanting to call it a day and head home. One of them calmly mentioned he was heading to the convenience store and would be back soon, leaving his 3 buddies behind. They were all annoyed, since their school was the only one in the area forcing them to hit the books, even on weekends. While waiting for their friend to return, one of them spotted Yuna standing alone across the street, holding something. She had a bike with her, and he nudged his friends, commenting that she was actually a total catch. A friend asked if he was going to try and ask her out. Grinning, he told them to hang tight because he was going to cross the road and go talk to her. Yuna was stressed out, fidgeting with her phone, and wondering why Dom was taking so long at the store, when suddenly, some guy walked up to get her attention. She looked up to see a stranger, telling her how pretty she was. He demanded her number, but Yuna just acted like he wasn't even there, completely blanking him. The guy was clearly clueless, and kept pushing for her digits, and for her to add him online. Getting increasingly irritated, Yuna looked him dead in the eye and told him she wasn't interested. She told him to quit bothering her, but he didn't take kindly to being rejected at all. His friends across the street saw Yuna tell him to back off. Finding it hilarious, they started snapping pictures, while the guy, now fuming, yelled at Yuna to repeat what she had just said. He insisted there was nothing wrong with asking a girl for her number, and told her to stop acting like she was so perfect. Calling her names and acting completely trashy, he started hurling insults at her and hitting her with all sorts of offensive slurs. But the scene didn't end there. The guy was about to be put in his place. Someone arrived to teach him a lesson, and it was so brutal that the friends watching from across the street froze in their tracks, like they were hypnotized. The guy who had been bullying and disrespecting Yuna just because she wouldn't hand over her phone number was getting schooled, and it was Dom who showed up to dish out some discipline. He made it crystal clear to the guy that he shouldn't treat people like that. Taking off his cap, Dom revealed a look of pure rage, making it obvious he wouldn't tolerate anyone approaching Yuna with such disrespect. The bully from earlier was now slumped on the ground after his harsh lesson, while his friends on the other side were completely lost. They couldn't wrap their heads around what just happened and started panicking, blaming Yuna for everything. Yuna saw them staring and started shaking. She knew things weren't going to end well, especially since Dom looked like he was in a really bad mood, and he wasn't about to let the other two slide either. One of the guys across the street glared at Dom, thinking there was safety in numbers, but Dom moved so fast the guy didn't even realize he was already getting a wake-up call. Someone had to teach him that he needed to respect women, and Dom was there to make sure that kind of behavior wouldn't slide, all while giving the guy a piece of his mind. Little by little, the guy finally seemed to get the message that he shouldn't mess with girls, and if they didn't want to talk, leave them alone. Dom was an expert at disciplining people who disrespected his dear Yuna. For her part, Yuna was screaming at Dom to stop, terrified that he was going to get into real trouble. But Dom kept at it, because the guy's attitude was completely unacceptable. And then Dom turned his gaze to the next one. Since there were 3 of them, and he'd only dealt with 2, the third guy was shaking and sweating. He knew he was probably next in line for a lesson. That's when Yuna begged Dom to stop again. She was terrified that he might get into even deeper trouble. Yuna and Dom walked back in silence. She was still upset because he'd started a fight, and he was frustrated because he couldn't just sit by and do nothing. Eventually, Yuna said she'd just catch a taxi home. Dom asked if she was really mad just because he stepped in to fix the situation. Yuna admitted she was. Reminding him that she'd asked him not to go around disciplining people, Dom asked if she really expected him to just stand there and watch the guy treat her with such disrespect. Yuna replied that he didn't have to be so aggressive about it. While giving those frustrated guys a piece of her mind, Dom asked if she really thought he shouldn't have stepped in. Like, would she have preferred he just stood there and watched? Yuna stayed silent for a second. She knew she was in the wrong, but she didn't want Dom meddling in her business. That's when Dom told Yuna that for a girl who grew up living like a princess, she probably thought he was just like everyone else. Walking away from Yuna, Dom added that he sincerely hoped she'd make it home safe. The guy from the convenience store who'd bailed and left the bag behind was on his phone. It sounded like he was calling for backup. Explaining what happened to his 3 buddies, things started getting real once he retold the incident to a close friend, and these happened to be guys connected to Vinny, who's known for being a total troublemaker. And an instigator, the guy on the phone, said he got it, and promised they were going to do something about it. The guy on the phone said he understood and promised action. Vinny's right hand about the situation with some of those pathetic guys. Vinny didn't like the sound of that at all. He crushed his cigarette and decided to go check it out himself. The guy who made the call rushed back to his 3 friends sitting on a bench. They all looked pretty shaken up and miserable. They even felt it was kind of unfair that they got dragged into a disciplinary beatdown. The only one who didn't get touched told his friends they shouldn't have bothered those girls in the first place. He explained he was only fine because one of the girls had kicked him away. The guy who started the whole mess then called him a coward for running off. The instigator then wondered why Vinny and Sung had been called out for something this small. He added that it would be super embarrassing if word got out that all 3 of them got taken down by just one person. Right then, Vinny showed up and ordered the instigator to get his hands off the boy. The guy was so startled he practically collapsed to the ground. Sitting there on the floor, the instigator looked up and realized it was Vinny, whose booming voice had basically knocked the wind out. Vinny wanted to know where the guy in question was grilling the instigator on the ground repeatedly. The boy replied that by the time he woke up, the person was already gone. Vinny then lectured the boy, telling him not to tell anyone they were from the same school, because it was just pathetic. Sung concluded that the person who'd handed them their defeat was just a regular student. One of the three people who'd also been put in their place claimed he wasn't entirely sure about the details, but he did describe someone with long hair and a bandage right under his nose. Apart from that hair and the bandage, he couldn't recall a single other thing. However, one of them had something way more useful. When that guy tried to flirt with the girl a friend, thinking it was a hilarious joke, snapped a photo. So they actually had a picture. They just assumed the girl with the bike was his girlfriend. The quality was pretty trash though, which made it nearly impossible to make out who was who. Sung was dying to know what he could possibly do with that snapshot of the girl. The guy in the photo who'd gotten shut down by her was seriously annoyed that someone had caught that moment on camera. Vinny, after scrutinizing the photo and the bike, realized he could use this to dig up some real intel. Vinny told Sung to send the file over, explaining that he finally had an idea of how to play this. Vinny pulled out his phone and dialed up an old friend, a guy currently grinding away on a treadmill with his bike. Trying to hit top speed, the friend groaned the second the phone rang, barking about how much he hated being interrupted mid-workout. He cut the session short, wiped off the sweat, and finally picked up. When he saw it was Vinny, his mood soured even more. But Vinny just told him to shut it and look at the image. Vinny demanded his full attention, suggesting that someone on his team might be riding that specific bike. TJ shot back that he'd never seen a soul on his team riding that kind of trail bike. TJ demanded to know why Vinny was bothering him with this, and Vinny explained he was hunting for a guy with long hair and a bandage under his nose. TJ racked his brain trying to place him. Once he considered the description, only one name popped into his head. It was the guy from the Sunny School Student Council President's inner circle, and TJ spilled the tea to Vinny right away. Vinny's ears perked up the second he heard the dude was from Sunny's school. After naming the guy, TJ felt pretty proud of himself, knowing the student council president's friend was a big deal. But then TJ remembered how many times he'd lost to this guy. His expression soured, then shifted into a twisted grin as he stared down the bike. TJ had no clue what was really going down, but he was just relieved Vinny wasn't going to hunt him down at school the next day. Dom Kang walked into class glued to his phone. His classmate, a guy they called Mr. Tough Guy, kept bugging him to go out and hit the rollers. He wanted to ride their bikes after school, but Dom had to shut him down, saying he had to pull a shift tonight. Minu looked noticeably bummed, so Dom offered to meet up and train alone later on. Assuming he could take a break from his job, that is. Jay straight up told Minu to quit hanging around his classroom, but Minu fired back, saying the room didn't belong to Jay. It was a public space meant for everyone at school to share. But Jay countered that he never stepped foot in other rooms anyway. He had no reason to, but their classmates were already whispering, convinced it was just another lover's spat between them. Fueling more rumors they all bought into, Chelsea snuck up on Jay and snapped a selfie before he even realized what was happening. He wasn't having it, and demanded to know what she was doing, but she just swooned, saying he was cute and that she planned to show her friends. Back in England, she wanted to prove she'd found a guy she actually liked. She needed the photo to convince them he was her boyfriend and asked if he was cool with it. Jay shut her down instantly, but she just showed him the screen she'd already posted it. She shoved the selfie in his face again, adding that it was too bad, since you know it was already live online. Mia strolled into class feeling great, because she and her girl Yuna were locked in to catch a movie the next day. Yuna walked in and glanced at Dom Kong, who didn't exactly look thrilled to see her either. The two girls walked past without saying much, and even Dom, who usually lit up whenever Yuna was around, felt totally off. Not acting like himself at all, Dom tried to zone out. He claimed he was wiped out and needed a nap just to dodge any awkward questions. But Minu noticed the tension. Since neither Dom nor Yuna were talking, Mia picked up on it too, whispering to Yuna to ask if something went down between them. Yuna looked absolutely crushed, prompting Mia to ask if they'd fought. Clearly upset, Yuna replied. "It's nothing," Yuna said, looking over at Dom, slumped over his desk, fast asleep. She added, "We're not even close enough to fight." Outside, Dom's guard dog was watching his bike. When Dom finally showed up, the dog went wild, especially when he called him by his name. Dom had named his dog Jordan. He thanked Jordan for being such a solid bodyguard and watching over the bike. Dom told Jordan he was going to skip the rest of the day and head home early, but the second he let the dog go, the pup bolted, and Dom had to scramble to grab his bike and chase him down, no matter how hard he yelled, "Jordan!" The dog kept causing a scene, drawing everyone's attention. Once he finally got the chaos under control, Dom strapped Jordan to his backpack and hauled the dog onto his back. Everyone stared as Dom pedaled away with a dog that big hitched to his back. Dom pleaded with his buddy, "Jordan, please stop running off. It's dangerous. Someone could get you hurt." As classes wrapped up, everyone started heading out. Meanwhile, those 3 guys from the night before were lurking, hoping to catch a glimpse of someone. They kept watch outside Sunny's school, waiting for their target to walk out. They were dead set on finding the kid, but the ringleader didn't spot who he was looking for. Instead, he noticed the girl he'd tried to hit on the night before from across the way. Yuna was walking with her friend Mia. Yuna looked totally heartbroken because Dom, who usually knew how to cheer her up, had already ditched class. Instead of being bummed, the troublemaker grinned the second he spotted Yuna and pointed her out to his crew. Meanwhile, Mia was trying to talk to Yuna about Dom, noting that he'd been acting totally off that day. Mia tried to see if Yuna could shed any light on what was going on, but Yuna just brushed it off, saying it wasn't the first time Dom had skipped class. She told Mia not to sweat it. Dom was probably fine. Mia said she hoped so. Yuna stayed quiet as they walked, until 3 guys suddenly blocked their path. One of them asked Yuna if she remembered him. Mia, terrified, asked Yuna who they were. Back at the club where Dom worked, he was using his downtime to push his cycling tricks to the limit. His bodyguards were timing him, and Dom was crushing record after record, pulling off insane moves. In record time. It was obvious Dom wasn't messing around. He was dead set on impressing his friends and landing a spot on a team. That was why he was grinding so hard. He'd even mastered the stand-up maneuver, even though it was still a total beast to pull off. That's when his phone buzzed. He thought it was weird who would be calling him at this hour. Dom fished his phone out of his pocket to see who it was. It was Mia, and she sounded absolutely frantic. Realizing something was wrong, Dom went on high alert. She was sobbing, begging him to help Yuna. Yuna was being cornered by those same guys from the other day, and Mia was completely out of her depth. The moment he heard that, Dom's entire demeanor shifted even. His bodyguards noticed the change in the air. One of them called out that it was time to go, but was shocked when Dom snatched his bike. Dom took off at full speed, his face set in a look of pure intensity. The bullies were leaning on Yuna, demanding Dom's number. They told her there was no point in trying to shield her boyfriend because they'd hunt him down. Eventually, Yuna shot back that they were in for some serious trouble, starting fights and now chasing Dom down. She warned them that if they kept this up, she'd call the cops because they were becoming a public menace. One of the guys just gave a sarcastic grin, warning Yuna about what would happen the next day if she actually dialed the police. Mia was already on the edge of a breakdown, completely unused to dealing with this kind of scum. Softly, she told Yuna she'd already called Dom, and he was probably on his way. Yuna's eyes went wide. She didn't want Dom getting dragged into this, especially when she saw who she was dealing with. Vinny was trouble personified. He barely looked like a human being at all. Everywhere he went, chaos followed, and looking at Vinny's eyes, it was clear he was starving for a fight. He'd gone through all that trouble just to square off against Dom, and now Mia had handed Dom over to his bullies on a silver platter. The moment Dom's bodyguard spotted him speeding away after taking a sketchy phone call, they didn't waste a second chasing after him, though they ended up stuck at a red light. Riding right along with them was Jordan, Dom's loyal dog, who still couldn't wrap his head around how Dom was moving that fast on a bike. Meanwhile, Dom's dad called, demanding to know what the hell was going on. They told his dad that after that phone call, Dom had suddenly bolted toward his school. Pedaling for his life, Dom hit an insane speed, even losing his cap in the process. As he pedaled, his mind racing, Dom knew he had to get there before anyone did something unforgivable. To Yuna, he felt like absolute trash, especially since they hadn't even spoken all day, and he needed to reach her as fast as humanly possible. Old memories started flooding back while he rode. He remembered when he looked completely different even, if that mustache had always been his signature look. He recalled working a shift standing guard at a club, when he saw some guy manhandling a girl. Dom stepped in, telling the creep to let her go, but the jerk just doubled down and grabbed her arm. Another guy rolled up acting like Dom was being disrespectful, and threatened that his father wouldn't be happy to hear about how he was handling things. The first guy immediately backed down, apologizing to the young man and swearing he wouldn't do it again. The girl shot a quick look at Dom, and he caught her eye too. That was the first time he noticed Yuna, and the first time she saw him on her first day at Sunny's school. Dom Kang was still on crutches back then, stuck with a busted leg. People wouldn't stop whispering about him. Rumors flew that he must be from some high society family or have connections to big shots. While he was standing there checking his phone, Yuna walked up and asked if he was the mustache guy from the club. That was when they realized they were in the same class. She demanded to know how he had the nerve to show up at school like that, telling him to stop dyeing his hair and start dressing like a normal person. Dom Kang, clearly annoyed, asked who she thought she was to boss him around. She didn't. He pleaded with her not to tell a soul, student or teacher, about what happened that night. He tried to explain that the mustache and the club job were things that had to stay under wraps. Dom Kang asked why she was wasting her breath gossiping about someone she didn't even know. Looking him dead in the eye, Yuna snapped that if he was so scared, he should start acting like a decent student instead of a hoodlum. Dom Kang told her to quit nagging him with her useless drama, thinking to himself that she had some serious attitude issues. Dom Kang also saw Mia and Yuna catching up, having been friends since back in elementary school. The two of them were chatting right in front of him, like he was invisible. He figured he should have just pretended not to see her earlier. Why did he have to end up at the same school? With only a year left before college entrance exams, the other kids were ready to party like crazy. At least. That's what some guys were saying as they headed his way. But the second they passed Dom Kang, they gave him a dirty look and started talking trash. He pretended he didn't hear a word. Then they called him back, demanding to know if he was a freshman and asking how he dared to stare at his seniors. Just like that, Dom Kang told them straight up that he was just looking ahead, and that he couldn't help it if they happened to be standing there, seniors or not. They weren't about to let some kid looking like that talk back. One of them warned Dom Kang, but he'd better stop playing the smart aleck. Dom Kang didn't hesitate for a second, keeping his eyes locked on the guy. The guy tried to lunge at him, swinging a hook, but Dom Kang dodged it easily. However, since Dom Kang was already hurt, one of them kicked his crutch out from under him, sending him crashing to the ground. Then they started stomping on him, asking him who he thought he was. They walked off, sneering that kids these days have zero respect, and warning him not to cross them again, if he wanted to stay in one piece. Dom Kang was caught off guard at first, but now everything had changed. He snatched his crutch off the floor, while the two goons were still busy running their mouths. Just as they were yapping about putting a first year in his place, Dom Kang made his move. He was already right behind them. When one of them spun around, it was way too late. The crutch was already inches from his face. And just like that, Dom Kang turned into the school's most effective disciplinarian. He dropped both of them cold. Mia and her friend were walking by, chatting away, until they spotted Dom Kang educating those two troublemakers. Both punks had already been thoroughly dealt with. Yuna was stunned to see Dom Kang, crutch in hand, holding his own against both of them. He was still standing there, looming over the guys who had tried to jump him, even despite the crutches and that broken foot. Inside the principal's office, Dom Kang was getting a serious lecture. After all, a first-year brawling with third years was strictly forbidden. The principal barked at the teachers to get back to their classrooms, stop the gossip, and start actually keeping an eye on the students. He also ordered them to make sure news of the incident didn't leak out. He wasn't about to let the school's reputation take a hit. The vice principal was livid that this mess happened while he was away on a business trip. He told Dom that his parents were already on their way. Suddenly, a knock, the secretary rushed in. She informed them that Dom Kang's father had arrived. The vice principal ordered her to show them in. They stormed in. The secretary, clearly shaken, tried to stammer out an explanation. But before she could get a word out, they pushed past her. Dom Kang's father walked in, flanked by his bodyguards, commenting on how pleased he was that his son was attending such a fine school. Pulling off his glasses, looking even more terrifying, the father demanded to know what kind of trouble his son had gotten into this time. When he greeted the vice principal, the guy practically shriveled up, shrinking into his seat. Dom knew he was in deep trouble. He could feel the situation spiraling out of control, faster than he could handle. Later, when Dom walked out unscathed, everyone was whispering, wondering how he hadn't been expelled for taking down those two seniors. With his crutches clacking, people started avoiding him, and the rumors behind his back only grew. Dom was fed up with everyone talking about him like he wasn't standing right there. He found the perfect spot for a nap, high up, quiet, and isolated. He collapsed on the floor, completely drained, and began to drift off. He jolted awake when someone snapped at him to get up. Dom realized the person calling his name had even kicked him just to wake him up faster. Annoyed, he barked, asking who the hell was being such a pain, only to realize it was just that annoying girl who was always on his case. She glared at Dom, asking if he had any clue how much time she'd wasted dragging herself all over the school looking for him. Dom immediately shot back, asking why she was so desperate to find him. She told him the teacher wanted a word, and she had to track him down. Rolling over, Dom muttered that he'd go later, but for now he needed to rest. Dealing with teachers gave him a massive headache. Peeking with one eye to see if she'd finally left, he noticed she was still parked next to him, messing around on her phone. She glanced at him, and for a second she looked like she actually pitied him. How could a student dye his hair, work at a club, and still find time to beat up seniors? Why couldn't he just try being a decent student? For once, Dom Kang really wanted to know why she cared so much and kept pestering him. She was really pushing his patience to the limit. They hung out on the rooftop for a while. She asked him what his plans were after he finally graduated. Dom thought it over. He just wanted to know why she was asking him things like that, especially out here. She just remarked that everyone had things to do and figured he must have something on his mind too. Dom then mentioned he loved music. She asked if he wanted to write songs, compose melodies, or be a singer. He clarified that he didn't know exactly what he wanted to do with music. He just knew he wanted a career in the industry. She thought his answer was way too vague, considering all the paths he could take. Dom explained that he felt calm every time he listened to music, whether he was at the club or just hanging out at home. That's when he realized he wanted to create great music too. Yuna told him that if he studied music, he could get into a university and earn a solid degree. Dom Kang wanted to know if it was really necessary to go to college just to study music. Yuna replied that she didn't think there was a law making it mandatory. Still, university is where people go to specialize in the field they want to pursue. Dom listened while lighting a cigarette. Yuna, however, told him no. Dom pulled the cigarette from his mouth. Yuna then added that whatever he does, he shouldn't be smoking at school, especially not there. Yuna told Dom that if he didn't even have a high school diploma, society wouldn't take him seriously. Dom tried to brush it off and asked her what she wanted to do. Yuna said she didn't know yet. Dom struggled to wrap his head around her answer. Yuna explained that she studies hard every chance she gets because she wants to work hard for her younger brother. She didn't really have any long-term goals for herself. Then Dom asked about her brother, and she went silent. It seemed like a topic she really didn't want to touch. Yuna then said she was just wasting her time there.